Every 10 seconds, a child dies from hunger. Did you know 1/3 of the food produced in the world is never consumed? Hunger kills more people than AIDS, malaria, and terrorism combined. 1 out of 8 people will sleep hungry tonight. ये फैक्ट्स और जो ग्लोबल प्रॉब्लम्स मैंने आपसे शेयर किए हैं, आप और मैं जो 3 टाइम की रोटी खाते हैं, हम लोग सोच भी नहीं सकते. लेकिन जो दिमाग में मेरे नाम आता है, an NGO or a volunteer organization that is working around the clock to solve this problem, to address this problem, is the Robin Hood Army. The Robin Hood Army was founded by Neel Ghosh, and in today's episode, we talk about the journey of Neel Ghosh and how he founded the Robin Hood Army. The Robin Hood Army has served 14 करोड़ लोगों को मील सर्व कर चुके हैं. Over 3 lakh volunteers, 3 lakh Robins around the world, 400 plus cities around the world, and that is the impact which Robin Hood Army is working on. आज का एपिसोड बहुत ही स्पेशल है. आज हमने नील की जर्नी, रॉबिन हुड आर्मी की जर्नी तो डिस्कस की है, लेकिन जो ग्लोबल प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, हंगर के बारे में, पॉवर्टी के बारे में, एंड हाउ इंडिया, इफ भारत को जो एक डेवलप्ड कंट्री बनना है, उसकी ट्रांजिशन भी हमने आज डिस्कस की है. और मेरा और हमारी पूरी टीम का यही सोच है कि अगर एक भी पर्सन आज एपिसोड देख के इंस्पायर होता है और किसी की लाइफ बेटर करता है, आई थिंक आवर वर्क विल बी डन. I hope you enjoy this episode and you inspire and you spread more positivity around you. Neel Ghosh on the Journey podcast with Simarpreet Singh. नील भाई, एक कमाल की चीज़ आपको बताता हूँ. सो मेरी यंगर सिस्टर है, कज़न सिस्टर है, तो वो रहने आई हुई है यहाँ पे घर पे. एंड तो हम ना 2 दिन पहले वी वेंट फॉर ब्रेकफास्ट, ऑल ऑफ अस, माई वाइफ, सिस्टर, कज़न सिस्टर, हम सारे गए. एंड वो ना जैसे मेरे से छोटी काफ़ी 10-11 से, उसका नाम हरगुन है. तो वो अपना ना फ़ोन में लगी हुई थी एकदम, फ़ोन पे ऐसे ऐसे करके. एंड मैंने मतलब एक बार उसको रोका, 2 बार रोका, एंड तीसरी बार फूड ठंडा हो रहा था उसका खाना. एंड मैंने उसको फिर गुस्से से बोला, मैंने कहा हरगुन क्या कर रही है यार, तू खाना खा ले, फ़ोन बाद में कर लियो. एंड उसने ना फ़ोन 1 सेकंड, कहते भैया 1 मिनट रुको, फ़ोन उसने साइड में किया. मैं कहा क्या कर रही थी, आई एम क्यूरियस, क्या कर रही. कहते वो ना एक यहाँ पे फूड ड्राइव चल रही है, एंड वहाँ पे ना आई हैव इनरोल्ड इनटू दैट, सो वो मेरे को ड्यूटीज ऐसे खुल रहा है. मैं कहा क्या फूड ड्राइव है. कहते ना एक रॉबिन हुड आर्मी करके कोई चीज़ है, एंड शी डिडंट नो दैट यू आर कमिंग हियर फॉर रिकॉर्डिंग दिस, राइट. मैं कहा रॉबिन हुड आर्मी है, एंड रॉबिन हुड आर्मी है तो मैं उसकी पार्ट हूँ, एंड आई एम अ रॉबिन. एंड द passion which she spoke for the next 10 minutes about Robin Hood Army, पाजी उसको तो पता नहीं था हमारे. उसको जब मैंने बताया ना 15 मिनट के बाद, she was like, अच्छा really, and she didn't know you, right. And the beauty of what you've built in Robin Hood Army is that you've created Robins, एक self empowerment organization बना दी कि हर बंदा वो सेवा करे. But पाजी, I'm thankful of the awesome work that you're doing at Robin Hood Army. We are grateful. I think पूरी दुनिया grateful है जो आप काम कर रहे हो. And
thank you so much, sir. But I think, without even trying to sound overtly humble, right in the beginning, the reason this works is because of people like her. And there are tens of thousands of them. And for them, it doesn't matter to them कि like यार कौन चला रहे है, कहाँ चला रहे है, who started it. It's a very much part of their identity, and that's why it works. So what me and like the folks who are kind of like who started it and are running it, hamara like core goal is how do we connect the dots, right? But it's not our organization, so to speak. So when you say thank you, I'll take it, but it's on behalf of like the whole Robin Army, because they are the ones who are running it, like and so like even like hearing the story, it makes me feel very proud.
So हम पहली बार मिल रहे हैं,
हाँ,
right? So just to give context, and this is through a very close friend of mine, Sahil Vaidya. He recommended, and thank you for coming down to our home, to our studio here in Mohali.
Thank you for having me.
मैं आपको थोड़ा सा context दे रहा हूँ जो हमने पहले भी बात की थी. Because my name is Simar, and I run one of India's leading solar power company by the name of Hartake Solar. हम मोहाली में headquarter हैं. हम ये क्यों कर रहे हैं podcast? हमने अभी तक 11 से 12 एपिसोड रिलीज कर चुके हैं. What me and Komal started to feel in 21-22 is that इतना कंटेंट बन रहा था, बट जो हम उसको हम क्रिंज बोले या जो भी बने, एक मीनिंगफुल कंटेंट हमारे हिसाब से नहीं बन रहा था। एंड आई हैड ऑलरेडी 2015-16 जैसे आपको बताया कि आई वाज गोइंग टू कॉलेजेस स्पीकिंग ऑन एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप, सस्टेनेबिलिटी। एंड ड्यूरिंग कोविड हमको थोड़ा रियलाइज हुआ है कि यार एक जो इम्पैक्ट और मीनिंगफुल इम्पैक्ट, वॉट एवर इम्पैक्ट इज, बट वो जो एक मीनिंगफुल कन्वर्सेशन हम कैसे करें, दैट इज अराउंड एंड ऑफ 22 वी रियलाइज्ड कि नहीं यार कुछ तो करना है। एंड देन 23 वी आइडेटेड, एंड द बेस्ट थिंग वी वांटेड टू बिल्ड दिस पॉडकास्ट वाज कि हमने एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप पे कुछ नहीं बनाना, हमने बिजनेस के बारे में कुछ नहीं बताना, बिकॉज मेरा ये गोल था, हमारा ये गोल था कि मेरी जो दादी हैं उनको भी वो भी देख सकें, और जो मेरी एक नीस है 15-16 साल की वो भी देख सके, राइट। मेरे बुआ टीचर हैं। अब हर जगह हम एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप को ग्लोरीफाई कर रहे हैं, राइट। जो लोग 9 से 6 नौकरी कर रहे हैं उनको हम बात ही नहीं कर रहे हैं उनके बारे में। सो आई डिडंट वांट टू टॉक अबाउट एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप, एंड द बेस्ट थिंग to start and to learn was from people's journey, right. So that is why we've named this podcast as the Journey Podcast with Simarpreet Singh. And जैसे आज आपकी जर्नी हम लोगों को बताएंगे, आपसे डिस्कस करेंगे, in the process people learn and there is meaningful conversation that we are doing. And another thing that we had was to bring people that are creating impact, right, जो इंडिया और मॉडर्न इंडिया को contribute कर रहे हो, जो आए भी नहीं है, right. Like for example, I would definitely recommend that we've recently had Onkar Pavaji, Avon Cycles, right? People like these we've brought on our podcast, and people are, till now, they're enjoying it. So just wanted to give you context of why we are doing this. ये podcast क्या होगा, क्या बात करेंगे. So, just
thank you for getting this together. Like I've seen even like through a brief conversation, the amount of research which goes into it, and also like putting yourself out of your comfort zone. Like my wife has recently started her own business, and like I see herself putting herself out of her comfort zone every day. So I know it takes a lot of courage to like even share your thoughts. So thank you for taking the first step, and excited to see what happens with
awesome. it. So मेरा पहला क्वेश्चन सबको ये होता है, बिल्कुल बिगनिंग से स्टार्ट करते हैं.
चलो.
So हमने जब अपनी रिसर्च की ना नील के बारे में, रॉबिनहुड आर्मी, तो पीपल आर पैशनेट रॉबिन्स, है ना. हमको ना कहीं नहीं मिला कि नील है कौन. नील घोष ये पता है, SRCC पढ़ा, बट मुझे शुरू से स्टार्ट करो. कहाँ पे, वे वर यू बॉर्न, व्हाट वाज योर अर्ली लाइफ, क्या पेरेंट्स वर दे इन बिजनेस, आपकी अपब्रिंगिंग कैसी थी. तो मुझे उस पर थोड़े से हम 10-15 मिनट बात करते हैं, एंड देन वील ट्राई टू स्टिच दिस कन्वर्सेशन वे हेड.
This is probably the first time I'm actually going to be sharing stuff outside the Robin Hood Army. So I might not have all my thoughts together, but let's give it a shot. But yeah, like born in a nuclear family. I was born in Bombay. My mom's always been in academia. She was, when I was born, she was the dean of maths in Sophia College. And since then, she's been a principal for many years. She's the powerhouse of our family. My dad is like, he's been in service most of his life. He used to work for the Vadias, and then he used to work for a Swiss company. My dad is that person who's generous to a fault. There are many times when like he helps people and all, and he doesn't tell my mom, and he hides it from her, because anyone who goes to him for help will always get it, whether it's comfortable or not. And my mom sometimes doesn't like that. They had a very Bollywood story. They met in college.
Which college did they?
This was in Presidency College in Calcutta.
Okay, Calcutta.
Right.
Okay. So they grew up in Calcutta.
They grew up in Calcutta. They grew up in Calcutta. They came from very different backgrounds. My dad came from a family of industrialists. My mom came from relatively more humble backgrounds. And I think my dad, if I remember right, tried to rag my mom in her first day of college. And
वो सेम बैचमेट्स थे कि
no, he was a senior.
अच्छा, वो senior.
Okay. He got a taste of his own medicine, like in day one. And so yeah, I think like then they became really good friends. And काफी old school romance था. Like उसके बाद, like this was जब Presidency College, Calcutta was the hub of the Naxal movement.
This is in
early 70s.
Early 70s.
71, 72. And these are not just regular people. These are like really privileged people, like the police commissioner's son and all of that, who are wanting to create a better country. And so like like their college was the hotbed, and because of that, a lot of things would happen. Like exams would get disrupted, people would have to go. So the parents who could afford it, they would send their kids abroad, and so my dad was one of them. So he went to England to study for 5 years, and उस समय like WhatsApp नहीं था, phone नहीं था, so they would literally correspond through letters, and my dad could not like my mom could not receive the letters in our house, so like they had a very close friend who and so yeah, they had a very classic Bollywood romance. I think they were together for 7-8 years before they got married.
So when you say people, your father came from a family of industrialists, but
Yeah.
like unke apne
They were into
businesses the?
timber.
Timber.
Like my granddad was into timber. His dad was also into timber. My granddad also started his own.
So वो pressure भी तो होगा ना business join करने का.
Absolutely. हाँ वो तो था. But I think at one point my dad realized कि यार if he wants to like pursue happiness and he wants to be with the woman he loves, like probably best to like live in another ecosystem. So he moved to Bombay. So anyway, that's a bit about my parents. Then there's my sister, and she's 4 years older than me. And because I was the younger one, I like a lot of pampered nahi tha, but the strictness which she faced, I didn't. Like let's just say that.
And considering your mom is a
principal,
तो upbringing ऐसी थी घर पे पूरा एकदम वो
discipline तो था काफी
था.
But my mom's that person who like she also, because she's dealt with kids for decades, she knows gradually when to let it go. So like she'll be very very strict in like our early days, and then by the time we were like 12 13, like she started like becoming more of a friend, and now she's probably like, I think she's more liberal than both me and my sister. Like when we talk to her.
And how's your relation now with your parents?
Really good.
They're in Bombay only?
Yeah, they are in Calcutta.
अच्छा वो Calcutta.
They're in Calcutta. Oh, yeah. They moved back to Calcutta 10 15 years back. My mom was the principal of the Delhi Public School in Calcutta. I also really loved English. I thought I wanted to pursue English like my sister. I think like in my higher classes, I had like some experience in the classroom, which kind of killed my interest in the subject. And conversely, I had other experiences. Like I had a great teacher called Mrs. Vadva, and Bombay में. हाँ. So मेरा childhood was Bombay, Calcutta, Bombay.
So Calcutta मतलब पढ़ाई के लिए तो नहीं जाते थे ना?
नहीं पढ़ाई के लिए गया था. तो and there were two very different schools. So like Calcutta, I was in a school called St. Xavier's. Bombay, I was in a school called Cathedral. St. Xavier's is a hardcore boys school, like Jesuit school. Like you kind of like are taught things the hard way. It doesn't matter what your income background is, but it really matters how you play your sports. And I was a small kid, so I had to kind of learn to become tough quite early. And Bombay was much more like a school of like again like great opportunities. Like
but it was co-ed.
It was co-ed.
अच्छा Bombay वाला.
It was relatively more privileged. So like the kids around me, like they were like kids of like industrialist family or like CEOs and all of that. It was relatively easier for me as a guy because I used to play sports. So it was very like, I think sports makes it easier to make friends. So but I think very different mindsets, and I think both of them have groomed me in different ways.
But till 10th, आपने 5 years you were in Calcutta and 5 years in Bombay.
Yeah, I think around.
So you did a 10th and 11th.
10th, 11th, 12th, like high school was Bombay.
High school was Bombay,
and before that was Calcutta. Middle school was Calcutta.
Okay. And then
yeah.
जब वो वहाँ पे Bombay shift हुए, then you did your high school.
then we moved back for Bombay, and then I went to college in Delhi in SRCC. I used to play a lot of sports, so I think that used to.
Sports पे तो हम अलग ही पूरा section करेंगे. But I think you grew up very interesting. Calcutta, Bombay that time, right? So 80s, 90s जो आपने time spend किया Calcutta, Bombay. How was Calcutta that time? Like when you spent Calcutta? This is like late 80s, right?
Yeah. No. More like late 90s.
Late 90s.
Yeah.
And Bombay was early 2000s.
Early 2000s, yeah.
Exactly. How's it? कैसे था मतलब वहाँ पे Calcutta?
It's a lovely place for a child to grow up. I still think so. Like because one is like schooling is very, I think it's very universal. Like you have access to quality education, which is very affordable. And so like in like my school, like it would be like maybe the richest kid in Calcutta, like from that family, and also like the watchman's son, and it didn't make a difference. No one cared.
But that's a communist mindset also, na?
हो सकता है. I'm not sure about whether that's connected to like the schooling ethos, but and that's why groups were also very mixed, and I felt that was very like that really shaped my value system, you know, and like what I took seriously and what I didn't. I feel like the character also has like thoda a bit of a colonial hangover.
Yeah, yeah.
So like pura ye club culture hai. And like so your Tolly clubs and Saturday clubs and all of that. But that's also a great place for community. You know, like you learn things like okay, you'll go swimming, but you also learn horse riding, and you'll like get to like meet people from like.
I told you my father was also born.
You said you mentioned yeah. So I think most people who grown up in Cal have good memories of Cal. I don't know if your dad also feels the same way. काफी cultural भी है. So like you have to learn an instrument if you come from a warm family.
Do you know an instrument?
Yeah. So I used to play the piano. But no, it was a great place, and as I said, like made really good friends who are still my friends. So Calcutta, like what I love about when I go back right now, no one talks about what anyone is doing. Right? Like you talk about cricket, you talk about politics, you talk about like generally like family stuff. But every other conversation that I have in different parts of like the country.
खासकर नॉर्थ में तो है क्या करते हो जी कितना कमाते हो
Not just north, everywhere. ये कर रहे हैं, ये बिजनेस शुरू करे, इसने इतना फंडिंग उठाया, इसने यहाँ MBA किया. Calcutta में किसी को फर्क नहीं पड़ता. So you're right ना, वो एक बबल भी तो है ही है ना कि they want to be disconnected from the world. Very like I think the word is refreshingly unambitious.
Chill है ना, मैं इसको chill बोलूँ. And Bombay was completely opposite.
Yeah, Bombay again.
Paisa, financial capital. Bombay was also growing that time.
I think their street smartness matters a lot. They're like having a point of view.
Where did you grow up in Bombay? कौन सी जगह में
did
you stay?
I grew up in this place called Colaba.
Colaba.
Yeah.
So मतलब South Bombay एकदम पूरा.
I also like probably developed a better sense of identity. Like I think initially when I went there, like in Calcutta, we always like no like middle class, upper middle class, whatever. In Bombay, suddenly like I see like my peers around me are like much more wealthy and all of that. So initially it was a bit like okay, like do these things matter? Overwhelming, and maybe it made me a little more driven, which I didn't like see then, but later in the hindsight I kind of see. But after some point I realized like no one really cares like truly like people who really care about you. They don't care about like what your house
कितना
looks
पैसा है,
like,
कितना
or
बड़ा
like they
घर
care
है.
who you are and what you bring to the table and what your values are and like do you have their back. So I think that was pretty formative, but I wouldn't have had that clarity if I didn't have my Calcutta education.
And how was then Calcutta से लड़का बॉम्बे आया, फिर बॉम्बे से दिल्ली आ गया SRCC में.
Yeah, Delhi was fun. Yeah.
Tell us Delhi.
First time I.
You not stayed in Delhi before, ना? बिल्कुल भी.
I've not stayed in Delhi before. And.
So Shriram College is the best college. My sister went to Shriram College and like मतलब अच्छे नंबर तो आए होंगे SRCC पहुंचने के लिए.
बहुत ही luck game है. Like I think best of 4 होता है, 400 में से कितने पर marks आते हैं. Even if you get let's say 372 instead of 374, that makes a huge difference in which college you go to. And I fundamentally feel that's unfair, and I fundamentally feel we got lucky to like kind of just get enough marks. But it was really funny. I think like when I came into SRCC, like I had these misconceptions ki, like I just told you, like I used to play a lot of sports and also like school main cathedral I was like the football captain, and I used to like I used to be an athlete, I used to run. So I thought SRCC nerd college hoga, like I'll just come and I'll walk into the football team. I think for 2.5 years I was on the bench. You know, so that was...
Considering 3 साल का है
course. And that too, I think I like the few games I played was because the guy who was the goalkeeper, he was playing national.
And this was which year when SRCC?
6 to 9,
2006 to 9.
Yeah. So, because everyone was like sports quota and they were national level. So I think that was one part. Second part I thought was log bahut paraku honge. Chill the, you know, like everyone was like, we studied enough in our lives to get here. So this we're going to take 2-3 years of
same जो IIT वगैरह में जाती है यही फंडा चलता है ना.
I think so. I think नहीं as in पढ़ाकू लोग होते भी है, front benchers होते भी है, but
your time was chill. मतलब you enjoyed
so
the
I think like my time was playing football, playing cricket, making very deep friendships, and that's about it. Like I was a very like study in the last week. I used to luckily have really good friends who would like gyan, like they used to give me gyan in the last minute what to study when.
And how, so we've talked about social fabric of little bit of Calcutta, then Bombay, but Delhi तो completely different, जगह ही different है मतलब. अच्छा आपको खाने को बेस्ट क्या लगता था पहले बताओ दिल्ली में? फूड क्या टॉपिक हो तो बात ही ना करें.
दिल्ली में हमारे कॉलेज के कैंटीन में था छोले भटूरे. And there was a lot of chilling. So even right now, like here, I'm in Chandigarh. I'm at a old college friend's wedding also. And one of the guys who I'm kind of staying with, his house was like a dharmshala. So like at any given point, there were like 15, 20 people.
Yeah.
And even at like 12 a.m., you had nothing to do and you wanted to just hang out. You go to his house and there'll be 20 people. And I feel like really deep friendships, you know, and like very non-transactional, non-agenda driven friendships.
Yeah. वो होते ही हैं मतलब. I think school college में without vested interest ना, जब आपने किसी को चड्डी में देख लिया तो वो without vested interest ही है ना. So friendship without vested interest are the most long lasting ना, because आपने तब बंदे को देखा जब कुछ भी नहीं था यहाँ.
Right, है ना. Right. And I feel that's also like it would still hold true today. You know, you will.
कैसे possible है मतलब आज के टाइम पे when you meet people know who you are, people know who I am, right? So you come with that kind of, you can call it baggage or whatever. So मतलब how do you differentiate in friendship whether it is with vested interest or without vested interest?
And I think times when you just have agendaless meetings. You know, and you're just like seeing chemistry है एक दोनों के साथ, and like do you enjoy each other's
intuition vibe कहती है.
Intuition vibe क्या कहती है? And if you're not doing business together, if you're not working in the same teams together, but you like not even speak the same language but speak the same values, then वो like समझ आ जाते हैं. हाँ.
And this is something that you relate with your father more, right? Because you told that he would help people out of the way.
Yeah.
This is part of one of your parents may say this is your father, right? Friendship, relationships, community के लिए खड़ना है.
I think so.
Because कई बार ना, because why I've asked you about the friendship part, my father also, because my grandfather was on a transferable job.
Right.
So he used to go to 3 साल एक college school में, फिर 2 साल school में. And when I talk to him now, he says that यार मैंने ना मतलब he used to always long for friendship because आप 3 साल एक स्कूल में फिर आपको चेंज हो गया and you know how teenage is, it becomes little sometimes very harsh also. So आपने कभी वो चैलेंज नहीं फेल किया because फेस किया कि कैलकटा में 4-5 साल थे, then Bombay, and this is like in your teenage, right? And 13-14 साल के जो लड़के नहीं खुलते कई बार कि उनके अपने क्लोज रिलेशन बने थे. You never felt that?
Yeah, I think I was actually mentioning this to someone yesterday. For the last 4 years I've been in Delhi. That's the longest I've been in a place for the last 21 years. So like
that's why I've asked you this.
So I moved from Bombay to Calcutta to Bombay to Delhi. My first job was in Hyderabad. And then I moved to Delhi for Zomato. And there like one part of what I did was set up an international market. So I'd spent around 9 to 12 months in London, in Lisbon, in Australia. And then I came back to India for a bit. And then I did business school for 2 years in Boston. But I feel it's not quantity of time. I think it's depth of conversations. I think it's quality of time. I think it's being around people and like the right times rather than spending more time or going to a bar every day or not doing that for like 5 years in a stretch. I think that's what builds depth. And I think that's what builds like brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever you call it.
When I ask my father, he would always say this कि यार देख सिमर मेरे को इतने deep meaningful relation नहीं बना पाए, लेकिन on the contrary because he's done schooling in Chennai, he's done in like Calcutta, Delhi, everybody. So now it made me more aware and more, you know, एक awareness बढ़ जाती है when you travel. So 100%. In that case is also there, right? You're 100%. More comfortable talking to different people or different 100%. Communities because 100%. कई बार लोग अपने एक bubble में रह जाते हैं and they don't know what's happening around the world, right?
100%.
वो करके. But in coming to the SRCC angle, right? Football, bench पे 2-2.5 साल बैठे, छोले भटूरे की बात होगी. बट ड्यूरिंग दैट टाइम मतलब आप बड़े भी हो रहे हो, राइट? कॉलेज ग्रेजुएशन करनी है, SRCC, तो मतलब यू मस्ट भी आप सोच रहे होगे भी कहाँ नौकरी करनी है या कुछ बिजनेस करना है. एंड 2009 इज दैट टाइम अभी स्टार्टअप वक्त तो एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप वैल्यूएशन वाला तो थिंग सेक्सी बना ही नहीं था, है ना? सो क्या चल रहा था 2009? व्हाट वाज हैपनिंग विद यू?
फनी, तो आई थिंक टिल 2008 SRCC had used to have like almost like 80-90% or maybe even 100% placement. तो I was like हाँ ठीक है जॉब कर लेंगे like for a couple of years and then we'll figure out life, you know, like कुछ ना कुछ तो हो ही जाएगा. Like I can relatively connect with people. And in 2000, I think early 2008, that's when like recession came. and I think our placements went from like 100% to like 20%. So very, very few companies were coming to campus. I think like even the few ones which were coming, like the McKinsey and Bain, like they were like shortlisting from GPA, and I would do decently, but I wasn't like top 20, 10 percentile in SRCC. I was like probably like top 40 percentile or 30 percentile. I was very comfortable with that. I thought for a placement that's what I need. But now because like
Pool कम हो गया ना?
supply of jobs
Yeah,
have gone
correct,
down, so
correct.
now
तो
the
they would-
criteria is much higher. So कुछ भी नहीं हो रहा था. So every day I'd go and like with a couple of friends, and we prepare for the company coming in, then we see we're not even in that shortlist, and like क्या हो रहा है?
मतलब SRCC आके भी यार मैं नौकरी नहीं लग रही.
Yeah, all of that. And so then finally, I think one day, like we want in some shortlist, and then me and these two individual friends, I was friends with like Abhas and Vidya. And Abhas I'm actually like staying with right now in the wedding, and we were all pretty frustrated कि क्या हो रहा है, like I mean like यार bunk all this, like CR Park में दुर्गा पूजा हो रहा है, let's just like bunk all the preparation and all, let's just go chill for the night and like go for like जो भी rides है, खाना खाते हैं, all of that. So I think we were there all night. We came back I think like early in the morning, like the three of us, and like they also like got to know each other for the first time. The next 2 days, I think all of us got our jobs, right, with zero preparation. And like, so I started in a finance company called DE Shaw, and it was a pretty decent job then in SRC standards. I didn't think I'd get it because of like my track record in the last few weeks, but हो गया without any preparation.
क्या कारण लगता है वो जो दुर्गा पूजा अटेंड करने का कारण लग रहा है
नहीं,
कि कोई स्पिरिचुअल रीजन लग
sometimes
रहा
you
है?
just need to like not make yourself the center of your story, or not like think your problems are the biggest problems in the world. And then you have that freedom to just be yourself. And then when people see authenticity on the other side, they'll be like, yeah, ठीक है, like कुछ तो कर लेगा ये बंदा. So that happened. We all got jobs.
तो क्या पैकेज लगा था पहला आपका?
यार तो ये भी, this is a good question. I think on paper,
हाँ ये बड़ा होता on paper in hand.
so on paper it was like the third best company on campus, and it was 5.1, and we were all very excited that we'll be earning like
2008.
2008 we'll be earning like
5 lakh रुपए.
50 grand a month and all. When we went there and we saw our first paycheck, we realized there was a bonus component. We realized there were a lot of other things, and it was slightly different, the amount. Having said that, it was more than enough for Hyderabad.
At that time.
Like we used to like, Hyderabad's a great place to do your first job, right? Like we used to like go to Taj twice a month, right? And we should pay like 500 bucks
This
a meal.
Banjara Hills, no?
But
Banjara
Taj
Hills.
Krishna and Taj Deccan Banjara Hills mein hai.
Correct.
And so it was a great, and I think like Hyderabad was a very like growing city or something.
Yeah,
like
at that time.
Facebook had set up there, Deloitte had set up there, Google had set up there. So there's a bunch of young working professionals, and we made really good friends. And even like in D Shore, it was a very collegial atmosphere, right? So I think that was great. Most of us who joined the job didn't have a passion for finance. We just went because like finance was the cool thing to do.
Yeah.
And our third flatmate, he
you,
was
you, Abhas,
and this guy called Vinayak.
Vinayak.
Like so Vinayak was in SRCC.
Abhas was in Deloitte.
Abhas was in Deloitte.
And
Vinayak was in D Shaw with me. Like he got
जितने कितने लोग select हुए थे D Shaw में आपके साथ? 5
out of which 4 took the
You
job.
and Vinayak.
Yeah. So Vinayak was the only one who was actually passionate about finance.
Numbers and
so
number
even like-
crunching.
So even the work we had, he would always go into the back end, understand everything, and now he's a trader in a hedge fund. And like he's the only one who's kind of seen it through because he loved it. And that was also an early lesson for me, that you need to love what you do. Like you don't do it because it's the cool thing to do. But seeing Vinayak's journey has also been very like inspirational for me. So the three of us used to be in that, and we were all very different in terms of mindsets, approach, all of that. But I think those 2 years were very, very formative, right? And I made really, really good friends.
Great friends
in D Shaw. A lot of them that's how I got to know about Zomato in the first place. So yeah, 2 great years in D Shaw.
And Zomato happened in 2011?
End of 2011.
2011.
Yeah,
How
end
did
of
that
2011.
happen? Because abhi Deepi and Pankaj were still building stage में चल रहा था.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing, like when I was in D Shaw, I tried to do CAT, and
वो MBA का भी कीड़ा था.
because it was the thing to do.
But आपके अंदर का भी जो एकेडमिक जो है ना, जो आई थिंक बचपन से जो कैलकटा में वो भी नहीं जा रहा है ना, मतलब है ना, वो कि करना ही करना है मेरे को, कैट भी करना है.
I think I was a little less secure as a person then.
Okay.
So I felt I needed the brands to kind of prove myself, right? I think that would be the honest truth of it. I felt like I kind of like needed that for like family validation.
कि लड़का ठीक कर रहा है.
हाँ ठीक कर रहे all of that. So I'm like हाँ ठीक है like I'm learning all this, but I'll tick off all the boxes. So so I think I did CAT. I didn't get through the top 2-3 like IIMs. I got through. I think IIM Cozy Code.
And Kozhikode is really good. भी अच्छा ही है.
हाँ.
But you were fixated to do Calcutta or Bangalore or Ahmedabad?
I think the Bengali thing in me, but and I remember like there being a lot of intensity at home because of that. They're like, yeah, what you're getting, dude, but I'm like, I'm not feeling it, and I don't want to do an MBA just for the sake of doing it. And at that point, like I met Pankaj, and that time Zomato was really.
Where did you meet?
Yeah, Delhi only. Delhi only, and so I met him, and I think that time I was 23, and he was 25, right? And at 25, like I've never seen someone with that clarity of thought, and just that absolute love for what they're doing, right? And
DP is also like that.
No, that passion, that resilience, like that was there from day zero, right?
You were inspired by Pankaj. मिले कहाँ थे मतलब generally वैसे?
No. So one of our Zomato guys, who's also a really close friend, Anand, he now runs this platform called Leap Club. So Anand had like joined Zomato at early stage, and he had told me कि like look like this
Zomato 2008 में बना ना
2008 में, but 2008 से 2010 they were still working in Bain.
हाँ मतलब 2011 like,
हाँ,
you were among the very like first people.
Yeah. It was very early. It was very early.
कितने number के आप employee थे मतलब which?
So that's also funny. I think that number keeps changing because I think when I joined there were like 30-40 of us.
Oh, अच्छा, that's very early then.
But within like my first day, I think 20 people had to leave. That's also, and so then I got my first dose of startup life and survival. So then so my number came up, but that was also very formative, right? And like I think that's when I really realized like what it means to get your hands dirty.
But you had an idea what Zomato is trying to do, right? You were sold with their mission statement and all that. कि नहीं, मैं ये जानना चाह रहा हूँ.
No. I was sold by the people, and I was sold by the passion.
कि पंकज बढ़िया बंदा है, जो कर रहे हैं मेरे को करना है.
He's still a very very close friend, and
he's not part of Zomato now, na?
No. He I think stepped down in 2018
as a co-founder, na?
Yeah, as a co-founder. He was always the executioner. Like Dippy was the one who had the vision and who had the audacity and who had the like absolute like fire in the belly. But Pankaj was the one who had to get it done, right? Like after like you put out that vision, and he was a very very behind the scenes person.
Yeah.
Incredibly humble, incredibly like he would just shy away from the attention, right? And like he tried to put it for the rest of the team and all of that, but very very clear thinking. I think if I remember right, he cracked IIT without like coaching, like a razor sharp brain. And both Dippy and Pankaj, they were not initially people's people, you know, like they're not like they'll come into a room and they're like they know it. But in spite of that, through pure logic, like how can you like convince like business owners to like change the direction? So that's something I learned, and that humility I feel which I saw in Pankaj, like I really aspire towards. You know, like I feel like that was very formative, like seeing that at an early stage. That this guy is like, he's done what he's done, but he takes his work really seriously, but not himself.
Pinder bhi ab, if you see in last 2-3 years, now is opening up, right? Now is going to various podcasts and because of whatever issues that he had. So ab jaake is more opening up and with Shark Tank and everything that's happening. So 2011 West Delhi mila aapko, right? West Delhi. So tell us that journey.
So it was the market no one wanted. Because like the money lay in South Delhi and Gurgaon and some parts of Central Delhi, CP and all. And it was the market, so it was given to me.
And salary same थी जो D-Shaw से ज़्यादा थी?
Much lesser.
Much lesser. So it was pure conviction. It was just pure conviction and मतलब कि पंकज के साथ काम करना है.
Yeah. I think, I think it was just like a bet on the person, right? And also like Dippy has been documenting like his journey in Zomato, what he's trying to build from like very early days. So even when I kind of read his blog and all, felt a kinship. And the P is cut from a different cloth. Like he literally nothing scares him, and he even till today, I feel, and that has always like been something we've observed from a very close stand, and something like it's some values we bring into the Robinhood Army. We can pick whatever we can have, because like if we have the right people and the right intent, ho sakta hai. So West Delhi was. So I've grown up in Calcutta. I'm a Bengali. My Hindi is very average. हाँ बहुत ही.
तभी बोल रहा हूँ ना वेस्ट दिल्ली.
हाँ नहीं अभी बोल भी लेता हूँ. Like it's still pretty bad, but it's confidently bad. हाँ अभी बोल लेता. But तब वो भी नहीं था. And so then it was, and this is 2011, 2012. So then it was more about like convincing restaurant owners. ये पहले internet क्या है? You know, because we're going to restaurant owners who at that point did not
2011, right? 2011.
हाँ. Like they don't know what the internet is, so convincing like how it works, like how people like put their websites, and like showing them how it works, then showing them what Zomato is, and like how, and Zomato tech has always been on point, right? So like us samay bhi also like targeting, you know, like anyone who's going to Zomato is hungry. So I'm like, that's one of the reasons why you want to kind of reach out to them. We had very strong tracking mechanisms as to how we're making business for restaurants. So that any business owner would kind of understand. But kind of articulating that was like a huge humbling cycle. You know, because that's when I realized, you know, like any of this Calcutta baggage I had about pedigree, about educational institutions.
और खासकर वेस्ट दिल्ली.
हाँ कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता किसी को. Like if you can connect with them, if you can speak their language, great. Otherwise, you're just another fly in the wall. And I think that's a life lesson. Like we all live in our own castles, but for most people it doesn't matter. Then I got my first assignment, which was setting up Zomato in Calcutta. Okay. Right. And within like 3 months.
Okay, so West Delhi 3 महीने काम किया, फिर then Calcutta. That you must be excited, है ना, कि Calcutta तो अपना अड्डा कर लेंगे.
I was excited. I was like, yeah, this is like my opportunity to like, this is my first baby, you know, like starting something of my own. But one insight at a very early stage we realized was that like Bengalis, and not just Bengalis, people from Calcutta, like they spent a disproportionate amount of their income on food.
खाना सही चाहिए.
No, we'll go to a reasonably higher end restaurant because that's the extravagance, right? So it was a good market to kind of build, and there we were kind of like hiring from scratch, and so we like, you know, building a team from scratch at 23. I love that experience. Right.
When you say building, मतलब आप entrepreneur जैसे ही build कर रहे हो ना, मतलब the kind of freedom that startups have given. When you say that आप build कर रहे हो Calcutta, मतलब basically Zomato/Calcutta आप build कर रहे हो basically, है ना?
100%.
So it's like you were the CEO of Zomato Calcutta.
Yeah, totally. And like we had
amazing
to like
exposure.
Get the content, we had to customize it to a local audience. We had to like get the first batch of sales, hire the team, and everything was very like first principle based. किसी का कोई experience नहीं था. And Pankaj, I remember at a very early day, he kind of like told me that like तेरे experience क्या है? What we're asking you to do is this. The trust is you'll figure it out, but when you're not, just ask for help at the right time. And I think that was also humbling. Because otherwise you think that अच्छा I'm setting up a city, मुझे सब कुछ आता है, but घंटा कुछ नहीं आता है. And so I think that like having someone like that, like being my manager for so many years, I think that has also shaped who I am a lot. And
also build a founder mindset also.
Completely. I think in Zomato, like, it was very awkward. Like, even like many years after I left Zomato, I would always talk about it as we. Like, it was...
यार जितने भी लोग Zomato में काम किए हैं ना, they build that cult kind of thing.
No, 100%. And
so Calcutta build किया कितनी देर?
Calcutta build, like we built it for like around, I think 6 months.
अच्छा, तो you were in Calcutta only?
Yeah, I was in Calcutta and like the...
घर पे अपने?
हाँ, the office was our house. And I think initially when I moved to Zomato, my parents, especially my dad, was very apprehensive, you know, about the move. Like, because that time startups were not a thing. And they're like, क्या कर रहे हो? Like, what do you do?
And Zomato was also not a thing.
Not a thing at all.
6 months Calcutta.
6 months Calcutta. Then my first international posting was London, right? And this was Zomato's first international operations was Dubai. And that was a runway success, right? And we thought that our secret sauce was that we manually collect all the restaurant information. So we have a feet on the street approach where we visit every single restaurant once in 3 months through kind of like a SWOT operation. And kyunki we keep updating the information and we have most current information, our SEO is strong, our quality score is really good, which is why we are always on top without like spending on it. And that won us the market in Dubai very quickly, very quickly. And Albinder was leading that operations there. And then Albi called me. Blinkit wala, yeah. Stellar guy. Again, like I think Zomato, like the quality of people
they could attract was
was really, and I think Albinder and Dippy kind of grew up together. Yeah. So like they go back a long way. So I think then their first big project was London. So that was my first like international assignment. 2012. September, October 2012. Right?
So East Delhi हो गया, West Delhi हो गया, Calcutta हो गया, अब लंदन पहुंचा.
Yeah, and then London.
तो घर वाले तो खुश होंगे, ये तो बढ़िया कंपनी कर रही है, लंदन भेज दिया लड़के को.
हाँ, and parents, they were okay. My sister was anyway in England.
अच्छा वो इंग्लैंड में थे. Oh, she was happy कि अच्छा.
हाँ, so I was like after a long time I'll be in the same place or same country as around her, and I was just like I think for the first 4-5 years in Zomato I was just like a Zomato Bhakt. Like if they send me anywhere in the world I would do it because I literally felt it was my own.
And the business model is same ना जो तब था और अब था मतलब they were trying to figure
completely
out.
different.
Okay.
So then
explain उस पे
so
थोड़ा
then
बताओ.
it was a restaurant discovery platform.
Okay.
So if you're looking for like let's say restaurants in Park Street in Calcutta and you want to go for an Asian meal and your cost for your budget is like a certain amount, you put on those inputs in Zomato and they'll give you the restaurant to go and then you go and you have your meal there. Now majority of their business is online ordering, right? And we got into that very late. We got
after you left?
Not after we left, but like post 2015, 2016. Swiggy was the early mover advantage. There were other players like Tiny All and all, but we were focused on restaurant discovery. We were
जो पहले भी तो ऐसे ही था ना कि मतलब जितने भी aggregate करके डाल दो. That was the idea, right?
And make it a discovery platform and kind of like the global equivalent was Yelp.
Yeah, correct.
So, and literally like Dippy had once put this very provocative poster out in our farmhouse, which was the office then, which was Zomato is going to eat Yelp's lunch, right? And that was also like when we raised our first Series A, which was 10 million by InfoEdge, that was I think the tagline in the TechCrunch article. I think like the idea of like taking an Indian company international and like putting our footprint there, that really
especially
drove me.
England.
Yeah. England, yes, but wherever. That really drove me and more than the ESOPs, more than the international opportunity. I'm like, nahin yaar, like this is our chance to kind of like show that like Indian tech is like slowly arriving.
Like, give me some instances, like three, if you have to condense three things. Like
So like let's say our modus operandi was like walking the streets and collect and getting all the restaurant information. So we used to literally like first stay in a service apartment. We used to put up a map of the London city. We, besides the team which had come from India, we had hired a bunch of interns. And every day, like, and this was like October, November, which was pretty cold in London. Like we would like it was like an army operation. Like we teams of 2 would go to different corners, get all the information through data collection and then come back and like scratch it out. So, and it was really difficult and like physically taxing, but we were very, very excited and optimistic that look like we're going to do something different. I think in our first day when we went live, we had like some 500 hits or 500 views, which is like less than 1% of any other launch. And obviously very, very disappointing. We're like, yaar, kya ho gaya? Why has this happened? Like, shouldn't our feet on the street approach work here? And for a few weeks, we had no idea. And we kept like thinking like, kya kare? Like, should we go out and sell and make it a little more like get people to know about it? What he would do is, and that brought a lot of like humility to us, like going to people who were in the industry, like restaurant owners or food bloggers or chefs or like PR agencies, ask us like, this is our website. This is how we collect all our information. These are data. Like, what sucks? Like, why is this not working? And then we got our first major lesson in product that they said like, look, this is a very exhaustive, great collection of information, but it's for an Indian audience, right? And we're like, what does that mean? So then they're like, okay, let's go like 2-3 levels deeper. Everyone in London uses the tube. But if I want to go to a restaurant here, I don't see what the nearest tube is. Right? So like, show me that. Secondly, there was like some crazy stats, like 19% of London uses halal, like has halal meat in those days. We didn't know that. We had no idea. But if we know that, we can like kind of put in like halal filters and make it much more relevant. Similarly, things like afternoon tea, right? So I think that was, and Zomato, as I said, like the engineering team has always been best in class, right? So if we give them a problem statement that they go like figure out how do we get like the tube station across every restaurant, they would figure that out in 48 hours and take it live. Like Gunjan and team and like Dippy was very, very hands-on in product. They would do it like that. So I think we had the luxury of that, so I think that was one huge learning. Second was, what we used to do was initially, like we would hire frontliners, like content analysts, sales managers, set up the business, take revenue to a certain level, and then and then find our replacements or local country managers, and then move to the next market. The learning was that's completely wrong, right? Because if you want, you need to hire top down. Why? Because it's very, very difficult to inherit a team, right? And even the person who's coming in, they have so much more experience. They have so much more ownership if they're building out their own team. And they have so much more relevant knowledge. So I think that was really, like again, like when I have kind of replicated a lot of our playbook in the Robin Hood Army. Like these are principles which have always stayed with me, even like what I do in Google. Earlier we had a very spray and pray approach. We launch our website and then we'll go start selling. So, and initially when you sell a product which might not have product market fit, the number one thing you need from a salesperson is passion, right? It doesn't matter if I'm articulate, but if I'm really, really, really excited about what I'm doing, दूसरा बंदा को इसमें तो कुछ है, like I should invest. But what we realized is we closed a bunch of people, but 3 months later we couldn't retain them. Why? Because we didn't have enough traffic. Because we didn't have enough traffic, we couldn't give them enough business. So then we literally made our first academic playbook of like different stages of a market.
This is 2013, 14, before Portugal happened.
Before Portugal happened. Or I think there was almost an overlap. Like this playbook kind of like happened a lot when Portugal was happening. And there it was a lot of like, we identify this thing called views per listing. So like let's say Calcutta has 3,000 restaurants, but 10,000 views. So then it's like, so then it's 3 views per listing or 3.3 views per listing. London might have 20,000 restaurants and 30,000 views. Typically, you want to prioritize London because it's got 30,000 views and Calcutta has 10,000. But the views per listing is only 1.5. So then we are like, okay, cool. Let's first collect all the information, bring in user-generated content, then start marketing when we reach certain VPLs. And once we reach another milestone, then start selling. Because then people will get sticky, right? So that whole that playbook, it's no one ever taught us that. I'm sure most people they study it in school or they do, but we had to figure it out the hard way, right? But sometimes when you figure something out the hard way, then it stays. Again, 18 months, probably most of it were failures, but incredibly formative.
Again, founder mindset.
Absolutely.
West Delhi, Calcutta, वो momentum बनी जा रहा है to build that founder mindset, to build that, understand that process, algorithm, and then Portugal happens, then ReFood happens. Tell me about ReFood, which you've spoken in the past, that ReFood was kind of the birth of the legendary Robin Hood Army. So tell us about when did Portugal happen and what was ReFood?
Right. So I think what happened was, my next assignment after London was Lisbon in Portugal. This was early 2014. And I think everything which went wrong in London, it came together in Portugal. And Portugal is still one of Zomato's bigger success stories. In fact, the local team has bought out the Zomato brand from the PN company and they're running it themselves. So it's very, very mainstream there. I think again, sometimes you feel like you are the protagonist of making good things happen. And then when you zoom out, you realize it's just luck, right place, right time. And I think Portugal was a lot of that. I think even me coming to Zomato was like a lot of luck at the right place in the right time. But Portugal, what happened was they were emerging out of recession in early 2014. And generally with like the funds we had that time, we couldn't afford top talent. So we used to like go try to find people who are hungry, but not people who are who've got established like track records. Portugal, what happened was a lot of people who had established track records were jobless, right?
So good talent, free. मतलब so
Great
आपको
talent,
great talent जो free,
affordable.
हाँ affordable और free भी है मतलब उस time पे ना because option नहीं है ना option
They're
नहीं है.
free and a lot of them are also failed entrepreneurs, right? And no one is more hungry than a failed entrepreneur, right? So for these people, like when we built with this local team, and we had the difference we did in Portugal is we had a country manager from day one. They were just more than doing it as a job. They were like, this is their way back into their careers, and like they thought of it as their own baby. So ownership levels were really high. Also, like food is a very very like big part of like Portugal and Lisbon and all of that. So like we had a very strong start, right? One is that.
But अभी तक delivery नहीं start हुई ना online delivery तो as a model ही 2015-16 में start हुआ. अभी is just listing aggregator है. अभी Zomato is just an
and we sell ads.
हाँ we'll sell ads correct
And we
जो
sell
हमने
ads,
वो
that's our
ads
revenue
डालनी
model.
है aggregator में वो जो Google कर रहा है basically मतलब ads
End to end.
end to end हाँ correct.
So then when we were marketing, फिर हमारा playbook था कि like let's because we don't have funds to like spend on like billboards and all of that, we used to partner with local credible organizations, folks which people know and respected throughout. And that's when I came across ReFood and a gentleman called Hunter, who had actually got American guy who had gone backpacking in Portugal and just ended up staying there for the last 15 years because he loved it a lot. And so I reached out to him for a barter, right? Like where we do something with them and like they can showcase themselves on Zomato and like we like have more offline presence through their out.
But ReFood was a restaurant na?
ReFood was basically a volunteer organization which redistributed excess food to the less fortunate, which is essentially the Robin Hood Army, right?
कैसे dots connect होते हैं ना life में यार.
हाँ यार, like you can't plan these things, and if you think you plan these things, you're fooling yourself.
Beautiful.
हाँ, तो I think that's so there I got really fascinated by the model. But till then, like life, early 20s, living abroad, like it's having a good time and it's building my career. Like my priorities are very clear and simple. But I found the idea so simple, and so obvious. I'm like, ये तो India में बनता है. Like it's not rocket science. You don't need to like think through something really complex. So I spent some time with Hunter. I spent some time with volunteers who were there just trying to understand ki, like, yaar, what motivates the volunteers? How do they distribute the food? What are the operation systems? How do they communicate within each other? How do they like do goal setting? And then when I came back after my Portugal stint, that was August, then got in touch with a couple of friends, and that's kind of like the birth of the Robin Hood Army.
So आपने the hunter story बताई, hunter ReFood हुआ, and that is primarily what basically you started to do with the Robin Hood Army. So 2014 जब आप मिले ReFood को and you were passionate कि यार, but did you think at that time कि मेरे को ऐसा ही कुछ इंडिया में जाके करना है? कैसे था? What was your thought process that time?
I think the thought process was that यार weekends को ये करना है.
Weekends को ये करना है, right? When you saw
कोई लॉन्ग टर्म प्लान नहीं था.
जो ReFood पोर्चुगल में कर रहा है, मुझे ऐसा ही कुछ
वीकेंड्स में करना है, ये तो ऑब्वियस है.
हाँ, वीकेंड्स में करना है तो ऑब्वियस है, इंडिया में जाके करना है.
Let's get my friends and do it. That's where it happened. And एक बैक स्टोरी है, I think 2011 का, when we so the guy who started the Robin Hood Army with me, he's not running it right now. I mentioned his name, Anand. So he's the one who moved with me from DE Shaw to Zomato, and he used to like lead Zomato's India operations. At one point, and
so he's the constant with you.
He's still like one of my better friends, and so we had our last day together from at DE shop, and typically what people do is like the team pools in a certain amount of money,
farewell type,
farewell types, and then because it's a relatively like 25-30 people, it's a decent corpus, so you can So we were having this discussion, like I think the week before, we were leaving कि like क्या करें उसके साथ, like should we do a Goa trip, should we buy a watch, should we buy a phone, and then Anand, like he said, यार बहुत cheap लग रहा है, like figuring out what we want to do with other people's money. He's like, look, a few of our friends, like they serve in a local orphanage. He's like, let's take those kids out for an experience, right?
2011.
2011. Yeah, and so we did that. Like there were like 8-10 kids, and we have a photo also from like that moment where we watched our first 3D movie, Kung Fu Panda, with these like 8-10 kids.
Wow.
Thoroughly like bonded and had a great time with them, and then like took them for a very unhealthy KFC meal in the mall after that. But it was probably still one of my happiest memories, right? Where I've literally like every part of that experience I felt happy and proud about, right? And so and then after that 2 years I didn't know, like it was the Zomato story, but the second I saw ReFood,
कुछ ना कुछ subconsciously था.
हाँ, so subconscious ला, and the first person I called was Anand. कि यार,
2014
like
में,
हाँ, this is what I've seen, करना है ये. तो so that was quite a, like it was a very like it's a very clear memory, and I think that's when you kind of realize that like you do giving for you, right? Like when it makes you feel calmer, it makes you get more perspective, and those are things you do for you. When you have that clarity, you don't think of it as a sacrifice. You think of it like it's part of my journey.
नहीं, but so India, आप मतलब you were sent back to Zomato.
Yeah, so we set up Zomato.
लंदन वाला हो गया था, लंदन चल रहा था, पोर्चुगल हो गया, फिर आप वापस 2014 में आ गए.
Yeah.
And then who did you call कि यार कोई ReFood जैसा करना है? आनंद को call
Yeah,
किया.
I actually called. There are actually two people also who I reached out to. One was Ashish, who was one of my closer friends from college, and there was Pankaj himself. And both of them were like, yeah, we are too busy building what we're doing.
Yeah.
So abhi like we'll be part of it. But
तू चालू कर, हम करते हैं इसको.
and Anand was like, हाँ यार करते हैं. Like he was also building his own startup then. He had left Zomato.
Okay.
But he was very like, हाँ, like this, like I relate to this, let's do it. So those were the first few calls.
वो आपने कॉल किया, एंड रॉबिनहुड आर्मी का जो नेम है, RHA जो नेम है, बिफोर द एक्चुअल फर्स्ट ड्राइव है. सो द नेम केम बिफोर द फर्स्ट ड्राइव और द नेम केम आफ्टर द फर्स्ट ड्राइव इन 2014?
It came before the first drive.
हाँ, so the first drive was September 2014, right? 150 का आपने सोचा था इतना खाना डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करेंगे. So September 2014 was the first drive.
No, August 26, 2014 was the first.
2000. August 2014. So
26th.
हाँ, name कैसे आया?
यार
आपने बनाया, आनंद ने कैसे?
I think Robinhood मैंने बनाया. And I think it happened when before coming to India, when I was thinking कि क्या करे. Our idea was quite simple कि like Robinhood is that mythological character who steals from the rich and gives to the poor, and like his heart's in the right place. So we like here it's not about stealing, but it's about like how do we take like more time from people who are relatively more privileged and kind of devote it towards serving people who are not. So I think Robinhood was always clear in my head कि Robinhood करना है, and I was thinking of calling it the Robinhood Project. Because in my mind it was just a project. Like that it was not an organization, it was not a long-term plan, it was a project. So that was, but then I think there was already a Robinhood project. Okay. Right? Like some rapper in the US had something called, so not even trademark. If you Google it, then if you get something else, then people get confused. And then I don't remember if Army happened before or after the first drive.
Okay. बन गया, मतलब organically सा आ गया Army.
But Army was more about like Indian Army में होता है, it doesn't matter what religion you come from. Yeah. Like it doesn't matter whether you're a Sikh or a Hindu or a Christian or a Muslim. Yeah. You're there for one common purpose, right? Which is like helping people, serving people. So I think like from that like a bit of inspiration came. Ki like how do we put Robinhood Army? Like it doesn't matter like what background people come from, what walks of life, like what are their political beliefs, what is their education or not. I'm like, if you just want to help people, come under this umbrella called the Robinhood Army. So I think that's kind of how it came together. There's a chance that, and I'm fuzzy about this, but there's a chance that maybe Arushi, And Arushi is like now one of my primary co-founders. Arushi, me, and Sanchit. And Arushi joined a month after the Robin Hood Army started, like in September. And she very quickly picked up all her creative work, like on social media, communications, messaging, all of that, and incredible levels of ownership, like for the last 9-10 years. So I think I have a feeling she might have kind of
Army
like
word.
army word.
But before we come to the hunger issue, distribution, the impact, the policy part, all of that, the first drive, you've spoken about the first drive, Hosgas, all that. Did you ever thought that Robin Hood Army would become this big in 2014?
But
कोई आइडिया नहीं था
yeah, I'll
कि
tell you.
इतना बड़ा बन जाएगा.
I'll tell you why. Like, I think, and a lot of like working in Zomato was all about the next month and the next 3 months, right? Like, it wasn't strategy. It wasn't like yaar ye karna hai. Like it was just like acha, like this is what we need to do today. So I think I was very much in, and I feel now I zoom out a little more. But then it was very much yaar is weekend ye karna hai. Next weekend tak itne local lana hai. So it was there was no long-term plan. It was like, look, I love doing this plan. चलो करते हैं.
बट कभी ऐसे क्रेजी गोल भी नहीं लिखा जैसे आप कहते हैं दीपिंदर ने जोमेटो और येल्प का लिख दिया था बट यू मतलब कुछ तो होगा
No,
यार,
I think the first on the first drive was a little pivotal. क्योंकि there's one thing which is reading up on the problem, one thing which is seeing it happen in Portugal, and one thing actually like getting on the roads in Delhi. And I think वही होता है in Delhi, like, and like every other city, we live in our own bubbles. So we might be passing by a place or driving through, but we don't really see it. But when you're out serving people, you are in their world, right? And I think that's when you kind of realize like that world is so big. And that's
और
when
आपके नेबर्स हैं वो.
Huh, absolutely. And it's not a different world. It's still your world, right? Like it's still like they are people in your community. They are people in your country. There are people who have families. They are might have the same values. So it's not charity, right? But I think after that first drive, in the back of our mind was yaar scale karna hai.
2014
To
drive.
think of it as a startup, not as a non-profit, not as a charity. Like let's think of it like the way we would think about any build organization, and let's bring those first principles and all the mistakes we learned in the past into kind of like creating a design around this.
So what does Robin Hood Army do?
It's a volunteer organization which collects fresh and excess food from communities and restaurants and gives it to the less fortunate. So basically, hyper-local model hai. What I mean by that without any jargon is कि अगर Mumbai में there are 32 different chapters, neighborhood chapters. So let's say Chembur में, the food will come from restaurants in Chembur. The volunteers will be residents in Chembur. And the less fortunate will be homeless people, orphanages, old age homes who live in and around the catchment area. Now, one big part which was important in day one and is important in year 10, it's not a food distribution organization. It's like when you're giving the meals, get to know the people you're talking to. Like if I am going out for like dinner with you after this, I'd love to know more about your life. And I'd love to share more about it. So I'm like, think about it like sharing a meal. So that was and through that, like a lot of community gets built. And then we can figure out like what really like problems people suffer from and how we can make a difference to that. But the idea is build community. And I think the last lever to that is like, there's no money involved.
You don't accept?
No
No acceptance of money at all.
There's zero funds. Everyone does it in their free time. A volunteer can put in like 3 hours a week or 4 hours a week and come into their local teams. But we don't collect money, and we can go more into the reasons as to why. But I think in a nutshell, that's what like in Zomato we talked a lot about ownership and founder mentality. I feel that's like when you're talking about your sister, I think like the fact that no one makes a buck makes her feel like
तो अपनी
the
चीज़
owner
है,
of the
ये
organization.
अपनी चीज़ है. And how big is the? It's been 10 years now. 10 साल हो जाएंगे अगस्त में, है ना, जो first drive से. And how big is the Robin Hood army today? Give me some numbers, some data points.
So we have launched teams across 400 cities. And why I choose the word launch teams, like right now what we're obsessed with is like where are we largely active and where do we have teams of like very active Robins. That is probably at close to 300 cities across India. We have launched in 13 odd countries, out of which 5 today are very active. There's India, there's Pakistan, there's Sri Lanka, there's Bangladesh, and there's Nepal. We have served, at last count, I think as of yesterday, 141.1 million meals across all these places.
141.1 million.
हाँ जी.
और देसी भाषा में बताओ कितने करोड़ हुआ? 14 करोड़ हुआ. 14 करोड़ मील्स आप सर्व कर चुके हो इस 10 साल में.
10 साल में. Yeah. And interesting stat, हमारा, and this we got to know in our 10th year kickoff. Some data person crunched this data. In our first 5 years, we had served 11 million meals. In the last 4, we've served 128 million meals. So there was a 11x growth there. In terms of, like, the heroes of the story are the Robins. There are 270,000 now registered Robins across all these cities and countries.
Cities in the world, across the world. 3 लाख के आसपास Robins हैं.
3 lakh are registered, but a lot of people are not registered. And we can't track that. But like a lot of people just come with their friends, their family as referrals or all that. But registered, there are around 3 lakh se thoda kam. And we have something called the Robin Hood Academy, where it's kind of like a career launcher where we are taking kids and putting them into school for the first time. So that is across 200 odd cities. And we teach 11,000 children, out of which 5,900 have gone to school for the first time through the Robin Hood Academy. So those are some of the stats today.
So 14 crore लोगों को आप खाना दे चुके हो 10 साल में. Approximately 3 lakh Robins जो selflessly काम कर रहे हैं, distribute कर रहे हैं खाना across the world, and 11,000 people that you have trained or taught जो through academy.
11,000 students who are basically children of the families we serve, who we teach on an ongoing basis.
Through the academy, जो Mission Swadesh वगैरह कर रहे हैं.
Yeah, out of which 5,900 have gone to school for the first time. We've enrolled them into school admissions. Is there any other track? I think the most important stat is not what is in the Robin Hood Army, but what's outside. So, and actually this is not on top of my mind. You might have more current data. But the last time I checked, like, the number of malnourished people across the world, or who have hunger-related problems, is 795 million across country. In our country, I think that's 1/4, which makes sense because India has 1.4 billion people. So I feel like right now most initiatives, including us, it's still very, very, we're scratching the surface, right? And that's the real, like, if you look at the hunger-related deaths across the world, there's 7,000 children who die of hunger, or 7,000 people who die of hunger every single day, right? And again, like, these are things which people don't talk about in mainstream media and all, like, it's just not top of mind. But I think that's like, VC world में बोलते हैं ना TAM, total addressable market, like that's the size of the problem, and this is kind of like where we are.
Crazy है, मतलब 800 करोड़ की जनता है दुनिया में, 8 बिलियन की पॉपुलेशन है, and when you say 10% आप कह रहे हो कि they are dying because of malnutrition.
They're not dying,
but
they are malnutrition.
They're malnutrition.
Yeah, they're not, the death is around 7,000 a day.
They're not getting food.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. And 40% of the food produced gets wasted.
In the world?
Yeah. In some countries like the US, it's more. In some countries in India, it's probably a little less than 40. But like, there's a huge leaky bucket problem. So thoda, for lack of better word, stupid hai. Right? Like that there's so much access to food. There's so much production of food. Like the fact that even like 10 people should stay hungry is not logical.
इतना फूड ऑलरेडी प्रोड्यूस हो रहा है और नॉर्मली जितने भी रेस्टोरेंट से क्या करते हैं फूड का नॉर्मली फिर
तो आई थिंक
फेंक
रेस्टोरेंट्स
देते हैं.
लाइक डिपेंड्स. अगर उनके बुफेस है देन जस्ट 100% फेंक देते हैं. अभी रेस्टोरेंट्स हैव बिकम मोर सोफिस्टिकेटेड, लाइक दे हैव अ बेटर सेंस ऑफ डिमांड एंड सप्लाई, तो दे प्लान अकॉर्डिंगली. तो वेस्टेज कम है बट होता तो है ही, राइट. द रियल वेस्ट माइट ऑल्सो बी इन सुपरमार्केट्स, right? Like which like they have like thousands and like of tons of like, and I don't know the numbers on the top of my head, which they kind of like which they don't sell or which get expired and which get thrown away. So the numbers of like the problem are much bigger than the numbers of the solution. I think one last part is to like what RH is, right? Initially it was very much okay, like how do we solve global hunger? But right now I think the more we do it, I've realized like through every meal we serve, that kind of like fuels conversations. People get to know people, they get to know what they're suffering with, and through that they make a difference to people's lives.
जो आपकी मिशन स्टेटमेंट बन गई अब.
Which is like how do you bring out the best of humanity using food as a medium. So case in point, and I've spoken about this a couple of times, but like it's always top of mind when I think about like what is a true, why are we doing this, right? There's a gentleman, Dr. Sonavne. He's a doctor in Pune, and he's been a Robin for years. And what he realized was that a lot of people who they're serving meals in that cluster, week on week, month on month, like they are failing eyesight, right? And what he realized was that like all they need is simple cataract surgeries, nothing more, nothing less. So he and the Robins, they brokered a deal with the owner of the clinic he works in, saying that, look, can you sponsor 50 cataract surgeries? I will take responsibility of it. I'll take care of all the pre-care and the post-care. The much bigger sell was convincing the people who this was for, because they're like, yaar, kya zarurat hai? Like, why do we get into it? But the folks trusted them because they've been serving them meals for months or years. So out of those 50 people who improved their eyesight, 48 people improved their eyesight. 2 people who were blind started getting the first glance of vision again, right? In my mind, that is the Robin Hood Army. And there are hundreds of incidents like that. But I'm like, that happens because of that basic act of sharing meals, right? And like a basic act of regular folks taking collective responsibility. Ki like, this is not anyone else's problems. This is something which we need to like kind of make a difference to.
हंगर के बारे में बात करते हैं. So when we talk about hunger, there's something known as a chronic hunger, chronic disease की बात करते हैं, because I'll shift more towards now policy and trying to understand what if the Robin Hood army is not there tomorrow, right? What if that drive cannot happen that day, right? क्या वो बच्चे भूखे सोएंगे? Right, so I'll come to that, but I want to talk about hunger. Give me some facts on hunger. दुनिया में क्या, when we talk about hunger, right? You say that you are trying to solve this problem.
Right. I don't know if I'm trying to solve the global hunger problem right now. I think like our direction is slightly different, but हाँ.
Tell me, what is your, मैं अभी chronic hunger पे जाता हूँ, but tell me some facts on how many people that you told कि कितने लोग hungry हैं इस time पे, India में क्या numbers
Again,
हैं?
this is like, so again, like 795 million people, most of them don't have 2 square meals a day. 7,000 deaths, hunger-related deaths every single day. 3,000 of them are children, right? There's much more intricate data on stunting, which is not on the top of my mind. So one way of determining how hungry a country is like the percentage of stunted kids, people who haven't grown to their size because of lack of like the correct nutrients. India probably like houses 25%. I think the last time this was kind of like officially like declared was like a few years back. That time it was close to like 200 odd million people who didn't have basic food. So these are the macro numbers, which are
This is global numbers, no?
Which are
global numbers.
Yeah.
और India के क्या numbers हैं? What are the India numbers?
There's
do you have?
not been like
Survey
enough research or studies on this. So it's more like what we see on the ground when we see like let's say certain villages, like they don't know where the next few weeks meals are coming from, or certain pockets. But there's no, like, at least to my knowledge, documented research as to what is the exact nature of the hunger.
So this leads me to the question, like you have a RHA Chandigarh chapter, right? How do you identify कि कहाँ लोग ज़्यादा भूखे हैं या उनको खाना चाहिए, वो कैसे आप करते हो? I understand कि आप, I'll come to the supply part. I don't want to use the word customer here, but मतलब जो आप जिनको आप दे रहे हो तो customer ही हो गए ना एक तरीके से, but supply पे आएंगे, that's easy to understand. But tell me about how do you figure out in Chandigarh or Tri-City कि कहाँ लोग poverty line से नीचे है, कैसे, if there's no data on it?
So, we have one fundamental process when we are setting up a city and when the city is growing called So city and chapter. Chapter is like neighborhood units in a city. So every city has multiple chapters. So when we're setting up, like let's say like when we were starting in Delhi, so one fundamental function of the Robin Hood Army, and there's a dedicated team to that, is scouting, which is identifying people who need the food the most. The most simplified version of what we were doing back in the day was when we were driving from home to work, like we see like families living under flyovers. Now that we know that, like let's say Outer Ring Road mein 5 flyovers hai, each of them have around like 40 people, then we know that in this stretch we need food for 200 people. But then while we started serving food, we realized that like when we were on the streets and we were looking for these people, we realized that the people who kind of like camp out in front of, let's say, AIMS, you know, and these are folks who are cancer patients. These are folks who are who cannot afford free medical treatment, have traveled across the country, suffering really deeply, but they don't know where the next meal is coming from. So then obviously like they need the food a little more than the families we serve. We've also partnered a lot with local NGOs and municipalities who have a sense of where the local Rang Baseiras are, who have a sense of where like which orphanages are funded, which orphanages are not, and keep asking for more help and like guiding those to us. So there's a constant triangulation process through like either direct field study or through trusted networks of non-profits or local government units to identify what are institutions or folks on the streets who need the food more than the rest. Even now, if like we're serving 100 people, there's a good chance that probably a good 25 people don't need the food. Like they're not hungry. And that used to trouble a lot of people and it used to be on my mind. But then like I literally remember like one of my, like Arushi, she once told me that like, look, even if 10 hungry people, we're giving them food, that's enough. Yeah, like in the sense like we are doing our bit and we try to keep getting more and more efficient. So that's so scouting is something which is an ongoing process.
So ये आपके on roll हैं लोग कि मतलब these are all क्योंकि
everyone the Robin Hood Army is a volunteer. No
कोई
one
salary
is,
है ही नहीं ना किसी
हाँ
की.
कोई salary नहीं है,
You
कोई
also
funds
don't
नहीं
take
है.
any, हाँ कोई.
All of us like figure out like the way we like pay our bills
So अगर
outside.
हमने चंडीगढ़ या let's say नागपुर और जैसे पुणे में करना तो you would look for someone volunteers or active volunteers there जो कि scouting कर लें वहाँ पे. But that you were saying that data might not be 100% correct. Data in terms of आपको पता लगे let's say there are 10 or 11 areas of like slums and जो भी है वहाँ पे खाना चाहिए, but you don't know exactly that क्या वो लोग उस दिन भूखे हैं कि नहीं है, क्या पता उनके घर पे खाना बन रहा हो.
Depends. I think like what happens is when we start going to them on a regular basis, day on day, then we really get to understand like what is the need or what is not the need. So I think consistency is what gives like, and when you say data 100% accurate, I work in Google. I work in like one of the most data-driven companies in the world. There's no data which is even like close to 70% accurate. Like, and I think like the only way to check and balance that is like being on the field constantly.
So Zomato वाली लर्निंग इधर आ रही है ना कि जाके अपने रेस्टोरेंट्स को लिस्ट कराना और यहाँ पे अब वो वाला फंडा होगा. So the dots have always been connecting.
Absolutely. And like it's like all the answers lie on the field. Like you're not going to make some fancy PowerPoint presentation, go through like a bunch of like WHO studies and then say this is where the need is. And we've had a lot of like armchair activists like, oh, like, are you really helping the people? Shouldn't you be giving them jobs? I'm like, yeah, we'll only know them when we meet the people, right? And we talk to them and we get to know them.
मुझे ना बहुत सही एक याद आ गया, since it's Robin Hood Army and you said man on the ground, I remember General VP Malik. One of the episodes that we recorded was General VP Malik, and he was the chief of army during Kargil, and he spent a lot of time in strategy in the Indian army before he actually became the chief of army during the Kargil period. And I asked him, sir, while you were the chief of army, there was Kargil पे लड़ाई हो रही है इंडिया पाकिस्तान की, the pulse कैसे आप कर रहे हो? कहते लोग strategy is one, but it is the man on the ground which I get the input from. At the end of the day, it is the man on that battlefield which gives me that pulse for the decision making. So, जो आपने army word use किया, Robin Hood army किया, you're also saying that कि Simar, all said and done, it is the people that are going there and they giving me that information कि whether
no two ways, no two ways. And I wanted to ask you, do you, like, you've been building your I won't call it a business, it's more than a business, ecosystem almost in like clean energy for years now. Do you also, like, how do you rely on data? And how do you kind of like leverage that to kind of take your macro decisions?
So I think currently when we talk about the energy sector, power sector, one of the data points, काफ़ी research हुई है power sector में, because power is a raw material, घरों में लगती industries, energy तो raw material है to do for industries, for anything. But I think so a lot of data has already been done. But one of the points which I am very mindful of is the per capita consumption, because ultimately that is the impact, right? So in India की जो energy per capita consumption is the lowest in the world, among the lowest, मतलब कई ऐसी countries का मैं नाम बोलूँगा बोलोगे यार इससे भी कम है. So for us, because we at the core are infra company, right? So we are building projects across the country. So data दो तरीके के होते हैं. एक तो data हो गया for our project related issues, right? So again it is the person, the engineer on the ground. But I think more or less the data in terms of, because it is not a new market, right? It is more or less established that this is the clean energy goals, these are net zero goals. But one of the data points that again we also use scouting is now more and more industries, more and more institutes, hospitals, schools, we are promoting them to go solar to reduce their carbon footprints. तो वो कन्वर्सेशंस होती हैं कि जाके अच्छा कितने लोग वो इंडस्ट्रियल एरिया में कितने लोग हैं, बिकॉज नॉर्मली अगर आप कोई इंडस्ट्रियल एरिया देखोगे बहुत पोल्यूशन है ना. सो आई थिंक वी डिपेंड ऑन डेटा विद देयर हैविंग दैट कन्वर्सेशन. वो क्या होता है, जैसे आपने फूड की बात बोली तो यार चलो चाय पे पूछते हैं कितने आसपास आपके लोग हैं जिन्होंने सोलर लगाया नहीं लगाया, इज क्लाइमेट चेंज एन इशू जो एक इंडस्ट्रियल एरिया में काम कर रहा है. सो आई थिंक in terms of the business data is pretty much out there in terms of, because काफी काम हुआ है, but we also as an organization rely on the pulse at the ground.
I feel like data is obviously, and like you said now, like right now the talk of the hour is entrepreneurs. I feel like there's so much hype around like what data can solve for. I think obviously data is really, really important, especially in this Gen AI phase. But at the end of the day, it'll always be directional. You can't take a decision based on only on data, right? Like there has
all these jargons like data-driven decisions and all that. मतलब ले ही सकते हैं,
data-directed decisions होना चाहिए. Data-driven, I feel, is like
data-directed decisions. That's a beautiful word.
I think that makes more sense. At least like the leaders I've seen around me, like it's not like they'll see, अच्छा, an Excel model splits this out, so let's do this. And I've seen that happen also. But I completely disagree with that. Because like sometimes like you don't know what the pulse on the ground is.
Correct. So I'll completely again deep dive into the hunger issue. बिल्कुल हमने the data point is done. Now the chronic part, right? Now what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because you've not spoken on this. Because so RHA ने set up कर लिए chapters, you've partnered with institutes to figure out कि कहाँ पे slums हैं, वहाँ पे आप serve करो. The customer part, supply chain में मैं भी आता हूँ. Because you're having conversations, so जो आपका, because मेरा कंसर्न क्या है कि एक जो भूखा है ऑलरेडी, जो हर रोज जब आपकी ड्राइव हो रही है, जो राजमा चावल लेने आ रहा है, वो अगले दिन भी आएगा, परसों भी जाएगा. बट सो बेसिकली जो वही बात होगी ना कि वो पैदा भी भूखा हुआ था, मरेगा भी भूखा. Are you solving? How are you solving that? Are you solving that through the Robin Hood Academy? Mission Swadesh? वो part आप मुझे
No, I think that's a...
How are you solving that?
It's a great point. And we've often got like, and this has helped us also kind of articulate in our heads why we're doing what we're doing. Ki like, are you making people more dependent?
Correct.
Like by like knowing that they have a free meal waiting for them in certain clusters. The way I think about it is that serving a meal is that first step towards getting to know that community which you have no access to. And building trust, right? Through that meal, like you like kind of get like conversations. Through that conversations, like it's like you get to know people, you get to know their families, what they love, what they don't. You also get to know like what are their shortcomings in, let's say, education or in healthcare or in other things. So, and you're building trust. So, for me, serving the meal to anyone who is less privileged, they're hungry. That's the best possible cohort of people to serve. Is building trust, and through that trust, you can kind of like enable them to do many different things in life, right? Now, the many scattered approaches, the many scattered examples of how this has happened, right? Uh, One is we already talked about like cataract surgeries. So now, when we're constantly serving meals to people, we realize most of the kids are not going to school in a lot of clusters. And so then initially we did what we thought makes sense in our minds. Ki, like tell them about like what are the benefits of education, like how their life will get better. In those sections of society, no one cares beyond the next 2-3 days. But if you tell them that if your kid goes to school, they get a free meal through the midday meal program, then they're much more incentivized to like go through the motion of doing that. Now, I would never have any sense of that unless we were serving meals on a regular basis. Because we have that connection or that community,
the local person,
which feeds us back what they are thinking, right? And through that, like something like the Robin Hood Academy can emerge. Similarly, like let's say when it came to vaccinations during COVID, we had a sub-inspector in Agra who was a Robin. And last year he kind of narrated this incident to a bunch of us that he used to go with the police office, with police officers to different villages and kind of like tell them that look, like vaccinations the need of the hour. This is why you need to do it. This is what's happening across the world. Very low adoption. The same places where he went a few days later wearing his green Robin Hood Army jersey with robins, like the adoption was much, much more. Why? Because these communities were people who were being served food regularly.
trust build हो गया ना.
Trust build हो गया. So, for me, like, I feel like now, obviously, India is growing. I am a huge believer in the India story, right? Like, abhi per capita income like $3,500 hai. Our guardrails are set. There's UPI. We have stable leadership, which is probably likely to last. So we have all the ingredients for a fueling economy. But I feel like that India and the India which is like the 200-300 million people who are still figuring out like their meals, forget their careers, forget their treasure. There's a big disconnect. And the idea of the Robin Hood Army is how do you bring these communities together so that they learn from one another and they're just able to like be part of that same culture and community.
बट जैसे अगर जो एक्चुअली भूखा आदमी है, मतलब बिल्कुल ही हंग्री है, जिसने खाना नहीं खाया, तो गुरुद्वारे भी जा सकता है ना, मतलब लंगर करने. Like I want to understand कि अगर जो एक्चुअली में भूखा है, let's I want to put it like that, है ना, just trying to understand impact कि अगर कोई एक आदमी भूखा है, I cannot even visualize that, right? Because you're so privileged, right? कि मैं 3 टाइम की रोटी मिली है, मतलब खाना तो कभी क्वेश्चन ही नहीं हुआ ना. तो मतलब जब मेरे को ना वो डिपेंडेंसी वाला पॉइंट कर रहा है कि उनको पता ही होगा कि मे बी दे आर नॉट अर्निंग. रॉबिन हुड अकेडमी पे आई वांट यू टू टॉक मोर ऑन रॉबिन हुड अकेडमी. बट जब उस एक पर्सन को मिल रहा है खाना, उसके डोर स्टेप पे आ रहा है, ट्रस्ट तो चलो बिल्ड हो रहा है, बट आंट यू ऑल्सो नॉट मेकिंग देम कि अच्छा खाना तो हम दे देंगे यार. एंड वो फिर मेरा पॉइंट ऑफ क्रॉनिक हंगर कैसे सॉल्व होगी. अकेडमिक ठीक है, बट मिशन स्वदेश उस पर करेंगे बात. बट हाउ डू वी सॉल्व दैट? बिकॉज अगर हम इंडिया को डेवलप्ड कंट्री बनाना चाह रहे हो तो 300 मिलियन भी तो हमारे लोग हैं ना यार, वो भी तो इंडियंस ही हैं, वो भी तो खुश होने चाहिए.
आई फील दैट्स अ लॉट टू डू विद ऑब्वियसली लेजिस्लेशन लाइक व्हिच यू मेंशन्ड एंड ओवर टाइम अ ट्रिकल डाउन इफेक्ट. Does the Robin Hood Army have the capacity to solve for India's hunger? No, I think like very frankly, but the way I think about it is that unless you engage with the community you're trying to serve, and unless you serve them in whatever capacity, you have no idea about even what legislation to pass, right? So that's step one. right? I'm not saying like the solution we have today, like of serving people meals, like tens of thousands of meals in cities, is going to be relevant in India 10 years later. I love it if it's not relevant. And I love it if we focus more on, like, let's say, skill building and education and jobs
Is
creation.
that a goal? Maybe
It depends on
pivoting.
what society needs.
But academy to bani.
But I think coming back to like one point, Simar,
yeah.
before we get into this
Yeah.
thing, is like, देखो, like, I might not have the capacity, but if I have the capacity to give you relief when you're hungry, I'll do that, yaar. Like, I don't have, like, I can't change the per capita income of this country with the resources I have today. But if someone is suffering from that, I'm not going to say that, oh, let the country change and let that person suffer till the country changes, and instead of making them dependent. Like, I feel that's basic humanity. We're not thinking macro, we're not thinking nation building, we're just thinking, यार भूखा है, खाना दे दो. Simple बात है.
वो भी ऐसे सोच रहा है मैं भूखा हूँ, मेरे को खाना चाहिए.
हाँ.
I'm thinking he's not thinking that person who's hungry. So this is the consumer side of it, right?
Yeah.
This, how do you convince supply chain? How do you convince restaurants?
Right.
My sister was telling that you get from Lalit's, from Starbucks. How do you convince them to get on board?
Yeah, so this was actually the relatively, like, I thought it would be more difficult, but it's not been, like, it's been relatively easier. So we started with restaurants we knew through Zomato, restaurant owners, because we've been there. And a lot of them, like, started giving the excess food. Then what happened is we started engaging this community and asking them to come for our food drives. Or we started, like, treating them like clients and sending them updates of photos and all of where their food is going to, like what are the smiles it's creating, and we're like just saying this is where your food is going.
These are restaurant owners.
Restaurant owners.
Who you know. West Delhi mein, Calcutta mein, across the network. Right here.
But what I realized is ki, like, when they saw those photos, there's something else came up in them. And they're like, you know what, like, excess food to de hi denge. हम अपने staff के लिए meals बनाते हैं. We'll give you, like, let's say 50 extra meals while you're giving the other food. A lot of these were people we didn't know. So I think two things make a difference to this community. One is visually seeing how, like, their hard work is leading to someone having a slightly better day.
Putting a smile.
Yeah. And two is when they hear from us that, look, we're doing this in our free time. There's no money involved. We don't want your money.
Or authentic ho jata hai.
We have jobs like you. We have businesses like you. This is our way of helping. Then people are like, हाँ यार, why not? So not taking money has this moral leverage which convinces people. And we started that with restaurants, but now all our partners, whether we ask for billboards, whether we ask for national television advertising, whether we ask for, like, a tech team to build out a retention platform, whether we ask for ride-hailing rides, the pitch is the same, Simar. That, look, we do this in our free time. There's no money involved. This is our way of giving back to the community, country, whatever you call it. Are you in? It takes a bit of a jerk to say, nahi yaar, I'm focusing on my business. Right? So I think, so we started with restaurants. Then after that, obviously one low-hanging fruit is weddings. Right? And there's a ridiculous amount of wastage in weddings because of the very human reason that if you're organizing a wedding in the family, you cannot have a situation where you have less food. So everyone will index for more food.
और हमारी wedding होती भी छोटी है ना, 500,000 बंदे ही होते हैं सिर्फ, है ना?
बस छोटी सी. So anyway, so point being that there's a lot of excess food there. So they're like, and the beauty of RH is because it's volunteer run. These are not ideas which are coming from me, Arushi, Sanchit, whoever's running.
अपने आप ही आ रहे हैं.
अपने आप आ रहे हैं. Like, we're just saying पैसे मत लो, but figure out how to, like, increase. So in one wedding, actually, like, I think from Surat we serve food for 9,000 people. Right, excess food. So weddings bhi hai. There's fresh food from restaurants. Then, like, what we realized in places like Hyderabad, a lot of folks had, like, the communities they lived in had hundreds of apartments. They're like, look, like, so many people are Robins. Every apartment will make one extra meal for the Robin Hood Army, and they coordinate on the WhatsApp group what that meal will be. So they so then supply is taken from households, not just that. And finally, I think what we started doing, especially during the pandemic, is dry rations, right? Because that is less perishable, that we don't need storage for in terms of, like, refrigeration and all of that, and that can serve communities for weeks at a stretch. So I think, like, coming back to the original question, like, these are, like, 3-4 ways, and again, all of this innovation has happened from Robins themselves. They're like, अच्छा ये work नहीं कर रहे तो ये करते हैं, ये ऐसे नहीं कर रहे तो वो.
And how many restaurants are right now? Are there any listing that's there?
I don't have a number on the top of my mind. Like it's like every city will have like all like our top 15 to 20 cities will have anything between like let's say 30 to 150 restaurants.
Which is the top city?
Partnering. That's a very interesting question. Our top city is Karachi in Pakistan, right? And there the Robin Rami brand is so strong that if a restaurant has a Robin Rami sticker, people are more likely to go eat there. So it makes business sense for people to give food to us, right? So they have, I think, served around 16 million meals till date. But what's crazy is that out of those 16, I think 14 or 15 have come since COVID. So they've really like scaled up very fast. Otherwise, Delhi is really, really large in terms of number of meals. But then if you look at like from a population perspective, you know, like how many people are there, then like there are chapters like Silchar in Assam. There is Kanpur and Lucknow. Like these folks have really like grown given the population there.
And how did restaurants like Starbucks and ये कैसे मतलब how did you think इन लोगों को तो खाना चाहिए ना कुछ भी दे दो चावल दे दो दाल चावल दे दो कुछ भी like they'll eat right but how did things like कि यार हमको Starbucks की पेस्ट्री भी देनी है is it something that Starbucks or all these XYZ premier kind of restaurants came forward and said that we want to contribute or it was something that you Arushi thought कि यार इनसे भी हमको वो बच्चों को एक experience भी देना है
right तो I think combination तो एक तो है all the Robins are consumers. They go to the Starbucks of the world. They go to everywhere else. So then when they go as consumers and tell them, oh, by the way, we do this in our free time. आप भी जुड़ जाओ.
Yeah, तो अपने आप जुड़ जाते.
हाँ. So then like a consumer's coming and pitching you, a customer's coming and pitching you. So then people are more likely, हाँ ठीक है करते हैं. There are some people who do it like just because they believe in the cause and they believe in the integrity of it. So there's a partner called TFS, Travel Food Services. So they own like restaurants called Coffee Chimney in Bombay.
Yeah,
And so these come from our personal network. Like this, the guy whose family business it is, he was in school with me, right? And he's like, look, like I completely believe and trust what you guys are doing. And so they have every single, like all the wow momos, everything you see in railway stations and airports come under TFS. So like we get a lot of the excess food and their freshly cooked food just because of the trust in the system. And a lot of the trust is not my relationship with Karan who owns it, but the fact that there's no money involved. So like we're happy
authentic ho jata hai.
Yeah. And then for a lot of other people, like, and which is also for me the best reason is they do it for business reasons. Because it gives them weightage, and I'm not going to take names obviously here, but and this is not just from a food perspective, but they're like, if we associate it with this cause, it's great for our brand, it's great for our India story.
Which is good.
Yeah.
Like,
no, it's best.
Yeah.
Because then it's not a discretionary spend for
100%.
them.
100%.
Yeah. Then it's part of their business P&L.
Yeah.
It's part of their market and brand spend. And
that's
that's future proof.
100%.
Right. So I when I talk to a CEO, what I'm trying to understand is like what are the incentives in India, and then how can I kind of marry RHA into those incentives?
Correct. It's not the purely CSR part. CSR
exactly.
wala kar
Exactly.
raha hai.
I try to stay out of CSR.
But you don't accept CSR, like मतलब अच्छा जब money आके accept ही नहीं करते तो CSR funds वगैरह भी नहीं आ रहे
ना. So
ना.
what we do is like if someone's like, look, we can just cut checks. So then we kind of like redirect them to organizations who we feel are doing great work on the field, like an Akshay Patra or someone. If we say, look, if you are okay to doing a little more work and if you really care about this mission and the cause, then why don't you find your own vendor, buy the raw materials or buy the food, and we'll go pick it up and take it from point A to point B.
But आपने पैसे नहीं लेने. वो clear है. Tell me something about. I'll come to the nutrition part because that's very interesting. Tell me something about the Mission Swades, the Robin Hood Academy. Tell me something about that.
So Robin Hood Academy and Mission Swades are different projects. The volunteers in Indore, they started teaching children in their free time, right? And then they started doing it on a regular basis. And, I come from a family of academics. So I'm like, yaar, education is not something you can do on an ad hoc basis. Like in some cases, you can literally cripple someone more if you give them a little bit of education, then leave it there. So I was very angsty about it. Ki yaar, I don't know if this is the direction. Arushi, my co-founder, she had a different point of view. And she's like, you're looking at the input of teaching. just think of it in terms of like we think of everything else in terms of systems. Let's think of it in terms of outcomes. How many kids can we put into school? If we do that, then if we continue the education or we don't continue the education, it's fine. But the act of putting them into school is a step up in terms of the opportunity they can get. So now we structure the Robin Hood Academy in a way where like it's basically like think of like आपने MBA किया स्पीच एंड में, तो उसके लिए I'm guessing GMAT CAT लेना पड़ा. So CAT के लिए लोग career launcher जाते हैं and all of that. So that's to get a college student to do an MBA. So this is kind of our career launcher for kids who live on the streets. We give them enough like basics of English and math. More than anything, convince their parents who we serve food. Make sure they have Aadhaar cards and partner with local NGOs and government schools to know when their intakes are and get them admitted. So that is like a 2 to 3 month process, which is time bound.
So are you a facilitator?
Well, absolutely.
Facilitator हो.
Absolutely
So you're basically जिनको आप खाना दे रहे हो जो हैं उनके बच्चों को, because you're doing, आपकी mission statement is having a conversation right over a meal, right? So you're not just, the beauty about RHA, what I feel is that आप ये नहीं कि खाना दे के okay टाटा बाय बाय, right? आपने एक स्टोरी बोली थी कि how lawyers ने कोई सेट ऑफ लॉयर्स थे आपके रॉबिन्स थे और वो जब देने गए खाना, बिकॉज द मॉडल ऑफ RHA सेज दैट भी आपने वहाँ पे बात करनी है कि वहाँ के जो बच्चे थे दे वांटेड टू बिकम लॉयर्स, राइट? सो दैट इज आल्सो इफेक्ट, है ना? तो इज दैट कि उनके जो बच्चे हैं तो उनसे आप कन्वर्सेशन कर रहे हो, तो उनकी फैसिलिटेशन आप करा रहे हो एब्सोल्युटली कि उनको उनके माँ बाप को कन्विंस कर रहे हो कि इनको स्कूल जाना ही जाना है थ्रू दैट रॉबिन हुड अकेडमी. उसके SOPs अलग होंगे ना रॉबिन हुड अकेडमी के, उसके वॉलंटियर्स भी अलग होंगे, राइट? एंड गोइंग बैक टू योर प्रीवियस क्वेश्चन सिमर, इज ऑलमोस्ट लाइक आवर फोकस इज जस्ट फोकस ऑन द कंट्रोलेबल्स. You know, so like now we स्कूल भेजना हमारा फोकस है, उनको कन्विंस करके वहां भेज के फिर खत्म.
हाँ, and then we'll keep teaching them. But if they drop out, if they don't continue, it's fine. Like taking them to school is the first step. Now, whether that will be the mission statement or the number one OKR for the Robin Hood Academy 2 years later, maybe not. That we have to be
evolve.
हाँ, but now let's be clear that this is.
But how are you teaching them? अगर वो स्कूल चले गए, स्कूल में तो नहीं पढ़ा रहे ना?
नहीं, so this is post school lesson.
अच्छा, पोस्ट भी आप पढ़ा रहे हो, right? और ये भी वॉलंटियर्स हैं, राइट?
Absolutely.
कुछ भी पढ़ा रहे हो, like मतलब इंग्लिश, मैथ्स.
What they're studying in school, or actually these guys they've had a dedicated curriculum, you know, and like not just like things like subjects which are taught in school, but even things like good touch, bad touch, right? For like kids and all, like just get them more situationally aware. जनरल नॉलेज एंड सो ऑन.
पता है क्यों? आई वाज जस्ट थिंकिंग, जो वो माँ बाप अपने बच्चों को भेज रहे हैं, दे आर नॉट सेंडिंग टू द सेंट कैथीड्रल्स ऑफ द वर्ल्ड, करेक्ट? दे आर सेंडिंग टू द लोकल गवर्नमेंट स्कूल, और वहाँ पे भी कितनी पढ़ाई हो रही है कितनी हमको नहीं पता. योर वॉलंटियर जो रॉबिन्स हैं सारे जॉब कर रहे हैं, पढ़े लिखे हैं ना, व्हेन दे आर गोइंग अगेन बैक टू सी, एक रीवैलिडेशन भी हो रही है, राइट? एंड दैट इज विच आई फील इज एक्सट्रीमली पावरफुल ऑफ द रॉबिन हुड अकेडमी, कि बच्चा पढ़ भी रहा है, अगर पढ़ रहा है तो सही पढ़ रहा है, और एक रीवैलिडेशन भी होगी, राइट? एंड दैट इज वेरी वेरी पावरफुल.
एब्सोल्युटली, लाइक यू गॉट इट like spot on, and in fact I'm probably going to use your language to articulate this later, but two kind of anecdotes about this. Like one is the academies which have been there for 3 or 4 years, the kids who are there, you can see a distinct change in their confidence, in their hygiene, in their articulation, because they've been constantly exposed to people outside of the government schools who have like regular jobs or regular privileges. So like one is when you see that compounding over years. You don't see it in month 1, month 2, but one is like put them into school, but if you keep interacting with them, their basic outlook changes. And the second one is like, this is something which is very, very inspiring, which I learned from a business school friend of mine. Very polished, articulate, put together person. One day he kind of told me, like it came out his life story, and he was basically like in a very low income neighborhood. He had semi-dropped out of high school. Like the system around him, like there was filled with like drugs and a lot of other things, and like he like life would have like had different plans. There's one NGO which basically had a system where like for one day they take kids from like low income like backgrounds, and they like show them an office, right? And this guy, he went to like some, I think it was either a private equity practice or an investment bank, and he saw like how like the traders work, like how this, like the CEO, like they spend some time with them, how he talks, like their lifestyles, like what cars they drive. And suddenly in his mind, he like, yaar, vision aa gaya mujhe. I'm like this, like otherwise the basic thing is like paro, but paro for what? Like someone has to bridge that gap also, right? But even that one day there kind of gave him that clarity, so much so he wrote to the CEO saying that, look, like this is where I'm at, like I don't have a lot of like pedigree this thing, but I want to intern. The CEO said, हाँ ठीक है करो करते हैं. He did that for 1 to 2 months. He did really well in that. Converted that so he interned there as a high school student. Then he wanted to go to college. So he wrote to the CEO saying that, look, I want to go to college. I don't have the resources. This is what I've learned here. If I get the opportunity to do college, I will. This is what my plan in life is. The CEO said, okay, do it, with the condition that if I finance you and you do well, you will finance 5 other people. Like it was as simple as that. They came from completely different backgrounds, and that connection or that chemistry happened. So in our graduation, so then after that he became a banker. He went to PE. His guests were that CEO and the 5 kids who he is now sponsoring, and he's just starting his own PE fund right now. So just based on that story, I'm like, yeah, that is what the academy brings. And now we have these routine like academy days where we take people into like educational institutions, the IITs of the world, or we get people into our offices and spend a day just so that like we don't have to tell them what to do. Let them choose that like this is what I want for themselves, and that's why I need to work hard.
You know, I have a crazy feeling ये जो Robinhood Academy है ना, this will be massive. ये मुझे
I feel it'll be much more relevant to our country in the years to come.
बहुत relevant भी होगी और and Mission Swades, you were talking about that.
So Mission Swades is again different thing. So what we've been like last 7-8 years, like our focus has been towns and cities, right? There have been times where we've kind of ventured into like on an ad hoc basis some villages, and we realized that like some villages have like a lot of supply, and there's some places where there are like maybe certain tribes or whatever where they don't know where their next few weeks meals are coming from. Like, and these are not too far away from the cities. So I think here what we've realized is that like again those pockets are not likely to kind of change in the next like few years. So now we have access to like thousands of robins. We have goodwill across like media houses, restaurants, corporates. The last muscle we have to build is logistics partners. And now that we've got into dry rations, how can each of our cities, like 300 odd cities, adopt villages which are like probably in a 50-kilometer radius which have the most need, right?
As per data.
As per field studies, as per going there. Like you have data helps you shortlist and then go there and just actually see what's happening. So we started that in an Independence Day campaign. So every city kind of went out of the periphery and they identified some villages. Some villages they went and gave food and they realized, acha, yaar, zarurat nahi hai. But some villages they went and gave food and they're like, yaar, like this is crazy compared to the cities, right? And hum kya kar rahe? Why are we wasting our time in the cities or towns? And I feel like the more urbanization which will happen in India 7-8 years later, like there will be very self-sufficient villages. Most cities will be self-sufficient, but I feel those pockets is where we can still keep adding most value to. And so now we're like, how do we build that infrastructure across the country? Like we have robins in almost every neighborhood of all the cities of the country. But now how do we kind of like channelize that energy, the work they do into the last mile? That's what Mission Swades is trying to solve for.
And is it because हमारे पास इतने गेस्ट आते नहीं जो कौन बनेगा करोड़पति पे आए हैं केबीसी में अमिताभ बच्चन नरेटिंग योर स्टोरी एंड हमने तो पूरा नहीं देखा, हमने तो वो जो आपके यूट्यूब पे डला हुआ है. हाउ डिड केबीसी हैपन? वाज दिस बिकॉज ऑफ दिस?
We had an Independence Day campaign again. So Independence Day is when we do a spike or we do one mega event. So generally the RH is very decentralized. Everyone learns from best practices of each other. Independence Day when the whole country kind of comes together. So here, what we were trying to do is not just serve like 1 million people across the weekend, but also how do we raise awareness to the hunger problem? And we were talking about this, that like hunger is not a you or me problem, and it never will be a you or me problem. No matter how bad life is for you or me, we're very unlikely not to have like if we don't have a meal in our house, our friends will come and look after us and give us that meal. So it's not relatable, right? And that's why it's not a very mainstream conversation. While terrorism, pollution, corruption, like that's something you and me face every day. Like anyone's at risk of that, right? AI. But hunger's not. So we're like, how do we make hunger a more mainstream conversation, right? And like, how do we get like, the reason why we are driven to grow this like a startup is because now we know what the situation here is. But when we didn't know, we didn't care enough. So how, like most human beings want to do something, want to help other people. And they want to do something good, but they're looking for that platform. So how do we make it more mainstream? So we did something called Mission Million 2018, where we said we'll undertake to serve 1 million people on Independence Day.
1 million people, 10 lakh bande.
Yeah. But we also built this tech platform, and we did a partnership with Filter Copy, Pocket Aces, and they made this video which kind of had millions of views, which directed people to our tech platform, which was built by engineers of Zomato then, in their free time, free of cost. And in that tech platform, people could tweet to 20 change makers, or like 38 change makers. 20 of them were people who had mass reach, like a Kohli or a Shah Rukh Khan or an Amitabh Bachchan. And 18 of them had mass resources, like a Ratan Tata, an Indra Nooyi, or whoever. And through one simple button, like anybody could say that, oh, like I am supporting the Robin Hood Army while we're serving 1 million people. Why don't you join?
ट्विटर की तरह हो गया कि मतलब
ये ट्विटर ही है,
ट्विटर
but through the platform they could like through one click of the button the tweet would go.
Okay, ठीक है.
So all these folks got like tens of thousands of tweets because top of the funnel came from Filter Copy. Millions of people came on the video.
Correct.
They went to the platform, they clicked a button, and all these people got to know about.
So Amitabh Bachchan and all that.
So a lot of them actually silently helped us. They're like, look, we want to help. We just don't want to we don't want our names. Right? Which I have so much respect for. You know, and these people are still our partners. Mr. Bachchan, what he did is he directed this, like what we do, to the KBC team. And that's when they reached out to us saying that, look, we're building a Karamveer episode, which is for change makers. And we pair that person with the celebrity. So why don't you come and have basically sit on the hot seat and people get to know about your cause. So that's kind of like how KBC happened. Like again,
अमिताभ बच्चन क्या कहते फिर आपको मिलके? अच्छा काम करो बेटे, क्या मतलब what was his?
Amitabh Bachchan is incredibly intelligent.
Yeah, I've heard his aura is just.
No, he's and he's so well researched. Like you, he will know so much about you before you say the first word. He reads up on people, the people he's hosting or whatever, and that's why his conversations are so real, so authentic. The thing about him is everyone around him treats him like a god. Right? And I'm a very peer-to-peer person. I'm like, I will give you all the respect, but I will always treat someone like a peer. Yeah. Like whether you're a billionaire or whether you're a person I'm serving, we're all the same. And somehow that led to great chemistry because I don't think he's used to that. Wow. Right? So he really, the sense I got is he really enjoys people treating him like a normal person.
आई थिंक सारे सेलिब्रिटीज को ये है बिकॉज सारे उनको इतना पेडेस्टल पे करते हैं ट्रीट मे बी
डिपेंड्स
कहीं को अच्छा लगता है
डिपेंड्स सम पीपल लाइक
व्हाट वाज द कन्वर्सेशन विद अमिताभ बच्चन ऑफ द कैमरा एनीथिंग व्हिच यू वांट टू शेयर
ही जस्ट वाज वेरी क्यूरियस कि क्या करते हो क्यों करते हो व्हाट ड्राइव्स यू एंड आफ्टर द एपिसोड ही लाइक लुक आई एम like my resources are your resources if you need me for anything. And he's made like a free brand video for Robin Hood Army during our COVID mission where we wanted to serve 30 million people. He was the face of the campaign. and all of that. And like so.
Do you have his WhatsApp number? या उनको hello I भेज देते हो?
Yes.
Nice. Talked about. अच्छा अब जीते मतलब we didn't see the full episode, but how Kajol was with you, right?
Yeah,
Kajol was with you, and how much did you win?
Yeah,
like
we won 6,40,000, and then we got timed out because it was a 1 hour episode, and a lot of the episode was talking about our story. But that money went to Akshay Patra, who's a partner organization, because we can't take the money.
You can't take the
money. So
money.
we said that look, we are a zero funds organization, but we are directing it to Akshay Patra, who's like our partner organization. But I think more than the money, more than the brand, whatever, I think like that day itself, we had more people sign up than in the 4 years combined. Our servers crashed, and like we had like our tech team had to like pull all-nighters to like get it back on track. So I think KBC was a big, like it was like a baseline shift.
Maybe KBC was preparing RHA for the COVID that nobody thought
Absolutely.
that go hoga.
So now that you connect the dots, maybe.
So those are March 2020 तो बात करनी है कोविड की. क्या था भाई, मतलब आप खाना तो भूखे को दे रहे हो. हाँ. रेस्टोरेंट से जब लोग ही अलाउड नहीं है बाहर निकलना. What was it at March 2020? Tell me your mindset. March, April, May क्या चल रहा था?
Yeah, so March 2020 for the whole year I think was wartime. Right, like you have peacetime in an organization, you have wartime. And I think again that was a very pivotal part of like what we can do in the Robin Hood Army, and it made me believe much more about like how we can help. So first, I think the first thing which came, like we decided, okay, like what is the immediate plan and what is the medium term plan? And by the medium term plan, I mean like 3 months ahead. So immediate plan is like we realized that there's Robins in every neighborhood of the country. We could also see that there are a lot of senior citizens in every corner who are living alone, and they may or may not be impoverished, but they don't know where to get their groceries from, they don't know where to get their critical medicines from. So the immediate thing we did was, we like, chalo, let's mobilize this group of Robins we have to help like the senior sections of society everywhere. So we partnered with ABP. ABP ran a national campaign which went to millions.
ABP News, no?
ABP News, yeah. Again, they've been like our partners since many years right now, and like we think of them as Robins. And so they ran a national campaign. We built a platform on our website where people could sign up. People could sign up and say that, look, I have an old uncle or I have an old parent, and this is what their need is. Can you help us out, right? And then across like 100+ cities, we kind of like made sure that people were either taken for vaccinations, because initially senior citizens, or they were given like life critical medicines, or they were given groceries which they didn't have access to. So that was step one, right? And again in a like through that network of people. The second part was then we started hearing about like the reverse migration and people walking back, and like hunger really gripping the nation. You know, people going. So then we're like, yeah, we have to do something which is like everything we've learned in all our last Independence Day missions. Like we have to kind of like, that was net practice. This is the World Cup. How do we kind of like crystallize all the partners we have, all the goodwills we have, all the other NGOs who work with us, or for that matter, the government, and like do meals at a scale we've never done before. And that's when like every single corporate we went to, every single media house we went to, and every single like let's say content creator we went to, like we're in, no questions asked, right? So we gave ourselves a very like a audacious. I think till then we had served around like 15-20 million meals. We like in a period of 6 weeks from 1st July to 15th August 2020, we'll serve 30 million meals to the last line. And so that was something where we didn't do 30 million, we did 23.2, but it was mobilization at a scale we've never done before. And these were folks like even in Assam and all, they were going to like the remotest of areas, and like all the scouting they've done, or fresh scouting, like that's when like
मतलब 2.5 करोड़ बंदों की बात कर रहे हो आप, मतलब 1st जुलाई to 15 अगस्त जो आपने 23 मिलियन बोला, मतलब समटाइम्स क्या होता है कि बार मिलियन बिलियन में ना लोग कंफ्यूज हो जाते हैं, बट मोटा मोटी 45 दिन में आपने 2.5 करोड़ लोगों को खाना पहुंचाया.
हमने along with our partners.
Correct. Your partners, Robin's entire ecosystem.
So I'll give you like let's say we talked about K-Corp, we talked like the Godrej Group, Wipro Foundation, Reliance. They all like, look, you all have people on the ground. Yeah. We have the resources. Let's figure out what it takes to like go. Uber gave us rides to give foods across. Then any media platform, they said, yeah, take our.
But डर नहीं था उस टाइम पे तो बोल रहे थे कि अपना वो social distancing and all those kind of things. मतलब वो फिर कैसे मतलब
डर था.
How were you like you as the chief, right? Let's say I know आपको chief word नहीं अच्छा लगता, but still, right? Custodian is a better word, right? यार social distancing हो रही है, डर इतना हुआ है, right?
100%.
So are you जितने भी Robins आपके साथ जुड़े हैं 3 लाख बंदे, right? तो आप you are somewhere I feel responsible, right?
100%.
तो आपको डर नहीं लग रहा था कि किसी को कोविड हो गया, अगर कोई किसी की डेथ होगी तो फिर
it kept me up like most nights, and there was a lot of internal friction also. Like a lot of folks
with your team,
within the team, they're like, look, should we be doing this? Should we not be doing this? We came up with like very, very strict social distancing norms of serving people. You know, like what are the number of people who can go for drives? What is the modus operandi of like serving the meals? Like wearing gloves, wearing masks. We had a mask provider. Like a lot of venture capitalists, they just sponsored masks for like. At that time, I think we had 1 lakh people, like Robins, to go out and do it. I think also faith was with us. Because उस समय Delta नहीं हुआ था. If we had done this during Delta, it would have been a suicide mission. But this was the first 3 months where hunger was a problem, but COVID was not killing people. Right? So I think like that is something again where maybe at that point we hadn't seen the horrors of what COVID can happen, but
that was in phase 2, right?
Yeah, in phase 2,
wave 2.
Yeah.
उसमें भी आपको यही challenge आए?
So in phase 2, the way we again like pivoted before and after phase 2,
right? May, June, July 21,
was like we focused fundamentally on vaccinations. So this is when we again like use the same ecosystem, which is like hospitals, media houses, corporates, and the trust we built with the communities we served in the last year to make sure that all of them are vaccinated. We work with like local municipalities and government bodies to kind of guide them and look, this is why you need to set up a vaccination center.
Robin Hood Academy they were activated more.
I think everyone because this was a time when like normal work was not happening. So everyone was just focused.
So vaccine करवा रहे थे आप कि उनको facilitate करवा रहे थे?
We were working with the government to tell them this is where you need to set up vaccination centers, and then we were getting people from their houses and getting them vaccinated. I think Simar, wo clarity aa gaya in my mind that like look, like we like the power of the Robin Hood Army is good-hearted people in every part of the country. So if anything is at risk, we can mobilize people really fast. So example is like, let's say, I think a year and a half back, there was that horrible train accident in Orissa, in Balasore. And within like less than 1 hour, Robins from across 3 cities had converged there. And they were the biggest like folks outside of the CRPF who were carrying people from the train and I think there were 78 like people we carried from the train and took them to the hospitals. Similarly, like, and these are all micro incidents, but for me, that's a bigger picture. In Delhi, before COVID, there were there was a time when there were riots in Delhi. And that time in Delhi, we had 10,000 Robins. So again, we couldn't do anything about the riots, but through those 10,000 Robins, we created a network of safe houses across NCR. So if anybody, irrespective of what community they were feeling unsafe, they could kind of like reach out to the Robin Hood Army and they would take them to those safe houses. So in my mind, that's still like slowly coming together. I don't know where that will go. Food is the medium. Food will build trust. Through that trust, we'll get like lakhs of Indians doing good things and taking collective responsibility. We will go towards skilling, education, healthcare, but food will continue. But when shit hits the fan, and as it will, and we can see that like there's war happening in different parts of the world and all, we will have enough people on the ground.
ये आर्मी बन जाए.
Yeah, to like help and serve.
इन्होंने आर्मी बना ली actually. जो 3 लाख लोगों का है ना. So because anything, when you say ना, when So it is not only hunger, right? Hunger to एक trust. I'm just trying to understand कि वो जो 3 लाख लोग हैं, these are high compassionate people, high on empathy, and want to give back, regardless of whether it is hunger or not, right? So their KPIs or so-called, right? वो ये 3 है.
Is serving the citizen.
Serving the citizen, right? So it can be any problem.
Absolutely.
Maybe after 10 years hunger issue is let's say sorted.
Absolutely.
And then that time जो issue होगा maybe 3 लाख 30 लाख हो जाएगा उस time पे. So this is an army that you've created. Literally army बन गई है.
And it comes down to collective responsibility कि like these are not problems of NGOs or these are not problems of governments. This is like all our problems, right? And I think that's the mindset. And I think 3 लाख लोग कम है.
Yeah.
Like
आप कह रहे हो ना कि registered है वो तो मतलब.
नहीं, I feel it's too little.
Too little. Or
I feel it should be much more. Like
140 करोड़ की आबादी में मतलब 3 लाख.
It should be much more. And मेरा एक misconception था कि it takes a certain amount of privilege to give back. बिल्कुल भी नहीं है. बिल्कुल भी नहीं है. There are small cities or towns which are being run by these young people whose parents are like a bus driver.
Yeah.
They run hundreds of people.
And they're more compassionate than most of.
I heard a story of this guy, Warangal में. He's a student, and there was a chapter in NIT Warangal. So this guy, he's like, जब भी drive होता है, give me advance notice. He used to walk 6 kilometers to just go serve people for like half an hour, 45 minutes, and then walk 6 kilometers back because he could not afford the bus fees. And when the students of NIT got to know, they're like, क्या कर रहे हैं? Just बता दे, we'll pick you up here. But my point is that someone like that can do it. Anyone can make a difference. Like it's just about spreading that access. And now, I think like so far, like our playbook right now has been things which we know, which is like Zomato को कैसे build किया, Google को कैसे build किया, how do you look at data, how do you like leverage social media, how do you leverage media houses. But I feel what we are barely scratching the surface because we are kind of ancient also with that is creators, right? And how can they also like mobilize like their massive like followers? And I'm not even saying join the Robin Hood Army. I'm saying join any organization which helps you take more collective responsibility.
So as a custodian, and I want to play the devil's advocate थोड़ी देर के लिए. तो एज अ कस्टोडियन हम जितनी मर्जी फेम पावर की बात कर ले, 3 लाख बंदा जब एक मिशन के साथ जुड़ा हुआ है विच यू एंड आरुषि एंड संचेत ऑल ऑफ आर बिल्डिंग, तो दैट फीलिंग ऑफ पावर एंड दैट फीलिंग ऑफ डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन, how do you feel that kind of वो power आपके लिए क्या है?
No, I'll be very
more responsibility.
No, I'll be very transparent, like in terms of like there are reasons that I have been building the Robin Hood Army because of the service of it and because I love helping people, and there are reasons which kind of like once I have a better understanding of what my core is and what drives me, right? So the first part is like since childhood I've loved helping people. Like it's addictive. Like when you do it, you just like you feel lighter, you feel happier. And when you're thinking about it in scale, or when you're around like-minded people who love helping others, it's like it feels like the best job in the world.
Compound होता है.
Feel it, हाँ. Yeah. So I think like and वो हमेशा है कि like even you, me, like we come from a relative amount of privilege, but we've also had very subsidized educations. You know, in the colleges we've gone in and all that. The least we can do is use our leverage, our network, our resources to make a difference, right? So I think that's the altruistic bit, which is like how do we serve more people at scale? Because it's not an optional thing. Like I feel everyone should think like that, right? Like पैसे तो बना लोगे, but how do you like really help? Because there's enough people to help here. So that's one. The other part is I've always wanted to build a really large organization. I love the intellectual stimulation of it. I love the challenges you have to like. I love the Zomato journey. You know, like the problems we are solving. Like earlier, for the first 7-8 years, it was a very leadership dependent organization. Very
decentralized.
Abhi decentralized. Abhi systems driven hai. Like now we're trying to figure out through technology how do we solve for retention, right? How do we create systems and brand which make ourselves irrelevant? But that's like maza aata hai thinking through it, right? Like things we've never done before or never thought about. So I love that high. Or building a large organization, which really, and as I said, like money matters to me to an extent of being comfortable, right? Like maybe that might change. Like I don't want to like keep myself like this is who I am. But right now I'm very clear. And I think the one thing which I want to, when you talk about power or fame, I don't think that is something which like motivates me. But something which does motivate me, which I want to change, is respect. From my peers or from the people around me. That I kind of really enjoy that respect. So I don't care if like lakhs of people don't know that who's the person behind the Robin Hood Army. But when I have a conversation with someone like you, it's important for me that I win your respect through what, and that's one of the reasons why I'm also building the Robin Hood Army, and that's something I want to work on. I feel that's a flaw. I feel that's something which it's an insecurity maybe.
और subjective respect है भी बड़ा subjective सा.
Exactly. So it's noise. Just like पहले brands were noise, I think that's noise. But the other two, they are my core.
But आपको नहीं लगता जैसे if you see a lot of today on social media, and I don't know whether you want to comment on that or not, but मतलब अब सेवा है ना, जैसे आपने बोले कि काफ़ी लोग अप्रोच किए कि आप बताना मत, राइट? माई फैमिली इज ऑल्सो लाइक दैट, राइट? वी हैव अ फाउंडेशन, बट वी बिलीव कि हाँ कर लो यार, थोड़ा बहुत कर लो, बट इतना ना बताओ, है ना? So, but there are a lot of influencers doing in these NGO space who claim to not take anything, but put these fancy reels with an emotional music पीछे और सेवा करके दिखा रहे. You've never done that. I saw your Instagram. I saw you've never done that. So क्यों नहीं कर रहे? मैं जानना चाह रहा हूँ. Is that just something because you believe that you are just one of the Robins and that's about it?
Yeah, I think so. In the initial days, I used to
judge कर रहे थे इन लोगों को.
Not these people, let's say Robins who came in for going into a better business school, or going for a certificate, doing it for an ulterior motive.
Yeah.
Now I have zero judgment. I'm step one is helping. Now whether you do it for some other intention or whatever.
और वो help से अगर आपकी help हो रही है, I'm sorted.
It's not my business, right? So that's why even when you say all these जो reels बनाते हैं, I feel more of that should happen. In the sense because what we're trying to do is making giving back mainstream. There are always two Indias. There's the India which is going to be the $10 trillion India, but that $10 trillion India might also not look after 100 million people. And it's the responsibility of the rest of the people to look after those 100 million people. So if those reels help that, they're well and good. How do we, वही होता है ना, while a country grows, there are different levels of determining success. Initially, it's always money, right? But, and we were talking about this, ki the way they put it out in Harvard is not are you good enough to help people, but are you smart enough? And I feel if more people just get into that mindset, it's good for the country.
Tell me very quickly about, so Zomato you left in 2015, right?
I left in 2017.
2017, you did your MBA at Harvard. And then when did Google happen?
Just after that.
Google was 2020. And what do you do in Google right now?
I did two things in Google in the last 4-5 years. I used to work in Google Pay. So there
GPay.
GPay, yeah.
क्या बात है.
So that also
मतलब ऐसे काम आप कर रहे हो जो सबको impact कर रहे हैं, even in Zomato.
I felt very mission driven about it.
Yeah.
Because you could see UPI.
So what do you do in GPI?
So in GPI, I used to look after our monetization. So there were a few, so to make it more sustainable.
Right.
So there were things we had a micro app called Spot and a vouchers thing. So I used to work with product and our business teams to kind of build that out. Right. GPI is very exciting. Most people who are in that team, very mission driven, many you could see that impact happening across the country. So love my stint there. A lot of that team has now moved on into different things. Our leader, his name is Sajit, he's the CEO of Hotstar right now. My old manager is now the CEO of Snap. His name is Pulkit. Trivedi. So they moved on, and I just got a little there was so much Gen AI hype happening around the world. I'm most of it sounds like BS, but मुझे सीखना है. क्या है and all of that. So for the last year, or a little less than a year, I've been working in a regional role where in Google Cloud, where we're working across 4 markets and trying to
Regional is India, right?
APAC. Yeah. So it's similar to what I used to do in Zomato, right? And it's how do we kind of gain a better share of the market using also our Gen AI solutions. So I feel that's a muscle which I don't have in product, in cloud and all of that. And I feel at some point it's always going to be relevant. Your
LinkedIn profile says, Googling by the day and Robin by the night.
Yeah. So Google's been it's been.
How's the company Google ka culture? Do you think is Google the most powerful thing on this planet right now?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
But does Sundar Pichai know about Robin Hood Army?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But we've done
mail करो ना कि यार ये
but we've
काम
done
कर
a
रहे हैं.
lot with Google for the Robin Hood Army. So let's say one of our Independence Day campaigns just during COVID, Google paid this kind of like game where like, if you did certain actions, then you could serve meals. So they've contributed to more than 5 million meals, which went through the Robin Hood Army, right?
But yes, Sundar Pichai should know about Robin Hood Army. The kind of a Googler doing this kind of impact is phenomenal. So don't you Amitabh Bachchan का तो आपके पास है WhatsApp पे ना, but don't you think कि Sundar Pichai should be emailing and telling कि भाई साहब इतना काम कर रहे हैं Robin
I
Hood
think
Army.
when I have something specific, like a specific ask, like this is what we can do, then I'd probably reach.
तो डाल दोगे Sundar Pichai. The last couple of pieces, Paji, which I want to talk is the mission statement again. I'm coming to the mission because I feel that mission, purpose, ये भी evolve हो जाता है. I feel that कई बार हम ना mission को बोल देते हैं यही हमारा for life mission है. What you're building, what I've tried to understand through these last 3-4 hours is you've built an army. You've built an army of people who are compassionate, empathetic, and want to serve the society. In whatever way that will happen. Problems will keep on changing. Hunger might खत्म हो सकता है ना. कुछ hunger might shape into different. But as on date, as on 2024, give us 1 minute, couple of minutes on the mission statement and how do you want people to again join the mission of the Robin Hood Army?
Right. Yeah, so I noticed यहाँ आपका Sapiens है of Yuval Noah Harari. So towards the end of the book, there's this one line of success has always been more acquisition, right? Which is could be acquisition of wealth, it could be acquisition of kingdoms, it could be acquisition of like just like that's what denotes success, right? I feel like the world is getting more and more fragmented, right? And more polarized, right? And more unequal. Like there are fantastic things happening in the world and they're like the most horrible things happening in the world. I feel there's a need for not the Robin Hood Army, but for generally people to think of success as helping those who need it more, right? Food has been the medium to build trust with different communities and it will continue being that, right? It's a way for people who have some basics in life sorted, getting to know people who don't have that. Like VC terminology, maybe you heard about India 1, India 2, India 3. So like we have like 100 million people like us who like buy stuff online, who like go to malls, all of that. Then there are 400 odd million people after that who work for these 100 million people. Which is people who are cooking or who are like driving our cars or whatever. And there are 500 more million people after that for who the basics is still not seamless, right? And that could be meals, that could be education, that could be healthcare, whatever. And these are people who are like probably like farm hands or whatever. It's just very important for these 100 million people to kind of like really know the lives of the others. If they know and that awareness is there, the helping will automatically happen. So I think what the Robin Hood Army trying to solve through meals as a medium is making sure more and more people just embrace the fact that like, look, like we are still relatively like we have so much happening in our lives. How can we make these massive communities of service and trust in both these communities, which is not charity, but just helping your fellow human and getting to know more about them. And I feel like when people immerse themselves into that, they become just much more smarter about whatever they do in life. Whether it's looking after their families, whether it's their own careers. If you're building a unicorn tech company, you really need to know what like the next billion Indians are thinking or feeling. Otherwise, it's just a McKinsey PowerPoint presentation. So I feel like for us, still very early days in building that trust, building that community, continuously also being evaluative about what really makes a difference to people. Food is a trust builder, we know that. We'll use that as our base. But constantly embracing technology and more than anything, making the people who run it future proof, like not
और decentralized होता रहे.
decentralized. मतलब like I take a lot of pride कि if I stop doing the Robin Hood Army tomorrow,
चलता रहेगा.
maybe I don't know how much it'll grow, but चलता रहेगा, and that's great. And like all of us should kind of think about how to replace ourselves, so that people, like the next generation of people who come, is just a natural muscle in their head that like serving is the basic thing I need to do, or like helping my fellow countrymen to like it should be one part of my identity or DNA.
And if people want to join the Robin Hood Army, like how they can go to the website or something?
We have a WhatsApp number.
Okay.
And like
we'll
show the WhatsApp number. You just send a hi, and it'll take you directly to the local WhatsApp groups. Now, this is a very high level of what the Robin Hood Army stands for. What we are focused on right now is 2 or 3 things outside of like building on our base of food. One is like really taking our reach to the last mile. So we'll like in the process of scouting and adopting hundreds of villages, where every city is adopting villages, and like where there's base like really concrete need of like dry rations and all of that. 2 is like expanding our education arm. Like as you said, Robin Hood Academy is like what probably has most potential. And 3 is how do we kind of take this into countries like us, where there are huge inequalities. There are young and not so young people who want to make a difference and don't know how. And like we kind of take our playbook and like kind of like help them like build it. And all of this has to be kind of driven by technology. Like it's not like earlier used to be a much more like bigger believer in leadership. I think leadership is also time bound. It has to be technology which kind of like takes this ahead, these 3 pillars.
हमारे स्क्रीन पे ना अभी इस टाइम पे 2 बैलेंस शीट शो की हुई हैं. 2014 एक आपने टेड टॉक दी थी, उसकी नंबर्स हैं, और एक 2023-24. डू यू वांट टू गो टेक अस थ्रू दैट बैलेंस शीट? 1 मिनट के लिए आपको दिखा देते हैं अभी. यू वुड हैव द नंबर्स जैसे वैसे, बट यू वांट टू स्टिल गो थ्रू द बैलेंस शीट.
2017 the first balance sheet.
So ये जो बैलेंस शीट दिख रहे हैं, बताओ ये बैलेंस शीट.
Most important thing in the balance sheet is the debit side, where there's no money involved. There are no expenses on salaries or office expenses, all of that. Like that's a core part of who we are. 0 funds. Why? Because it builds trust. This is a trust building initiative, right? The outcomes we track are the number of people we serve meals. So I think 2017 May it was a little over 1 million, 1.6 million if I remember right. 2023 May that's close to I think 125 to 130 million. So that's grown around like 100x.
13 crore हो गए. 13 crore people you have served.
And
no money.
The number of kids, the number of cities we are on also has grown many times. This time I think it was early 40s, if I'm not mistaken. Abhi it's again 403. So that's 10 times. But I keep talking about like yeah, in my mind like the Robins are like incredible people. But the best part of the Robin Hood Army has and always will be like when you go give those meals, when you go like talk to people, like they give you their love, they give you their blessings, and that is a constant in any part of the world. And it's the best salary, the best paycheck, the best bonus anyone can get. Like we're not a bunch of selfless people, we're doing it for ourselves because we get those blessings. And that's why like there's one line item in our balance sheet which says like our blessings are infinite, or like
the intangible asset.
Intangible asset, but that is why we do what we do. And I keep saying this, like I have become like a lot of my problems in life have now become a little less relative. Like I don't take it that seriously because I'm like I get to meet so many people who have so much more and are still happier than I am. So it's kind of like therapy for me. And I feel like when someone is serving someone, like it's an equal relationship. Like you are getting as much as you're giving, and that's what we're trying to capture in.
And my last question is India 2047. 100 years of our independence. I know you are a strong believer in the Bharat, in the India story. How do you visualize India at 2047? What are your wish list? How do you see our country growing in these next 25 years?
I think this is like my perspective is through a combination of like things I've read, people I've heard, and then I'm like, what is my point of view? if you go back a little bit to when India liberalized, I think that was 91. China liberalized 15 years before that. That was 76. In 2008, China's GDP was around 4.7 trillion. We were 15 years later, 2023, we are around 3.5. Right? So we're still significantly behind them in terms of GDP, but we've not done, like, it's still 66%. It's not bad in spite of all the challenges we have. I feel that is going to continue compounding, and there are 3 or 4 major things in my mind. One, which like China has had consistently, and now we're getting to that point, is stable leadership. Like, I might have 100 things I agree or disagree with any government, but in my mind, it doesn't matter. There has to be one, like there has to be one organization which keeps us going for the next 10, 15 years. Otherwise, there'll always be constant, like, winning elections, like solving for short-term things versus long-term things. So there has to be stable leadership, right? I feel that's somewhat sorted for right now, for better or for worse, but it's there to stay. The second thing which I feel is really important for like really for us to realize our potential is digital infrastructure. So with things like UPI, like now doing 11 trillion transactions a month, 11 billion transactions a month, or Aadhaar, or ONDC, or DigiLocker, or for that matter, even like we're doing like 100,000 kilometers, 10,000 kilometers of highways every year. The infrastructure is on the right place. The 2 things which I feel we need to step up in, and like there's enough awareness, but execution nahi hua. One is like the biggest asset we have is our population and our demographics. But if more than half of them are not working, it's pointless. We're never going to like meet the India story. So it started with things like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. There are enough like initiatives towards that. But if anything, like a participation of like women in our labor force has actually gone down. Because now people have started making a certain amount of income, so they're like, it's okay for women not to work. And that, like in China, it's 90%, in Bangladesh, it's 60%. For us, it's like probably early 20%, if I remember it right.
Women at workforce.
Women at workforce. We need to like if that doesn't change, India's like, forget the 2047 story, we're not going to realize our potential. And I feel the last bit is like, we're still not a prosperous country. We're still not even a middle class country. Our per capita income is $1.5 lakh. So we're not yet a consumption market, no matter what great products we do. So we have to like kind of manufacture for the world. And that's something like, let's what people like you are doing. But unless that becomes a main, and the government's already taking enough efforts to like work towards that, but strategy and execution hai. That execution has to happen in the next 10 years. If we get a manufacturing game right, then in 2047, when we finish 100 years, we're a very different country.
What would be our ideal 2047? Like in one sentence, if you want to say.
Yeah, I think in India, where every Indian feels they have the opportunity to do what they want to do.
For me, one of the favorite things of going to a Gurdwara while I was growing up is the Kada Prasad and the Langar, tasty Langar, right? And that was the only kind of incentive that Prasad bhi main 2 baar leta tha, 2 ya 3 baar, yaar Langar hai na. And while I was growing up, right, Langar, when you're in school or let's say college, right, आपकी इतनी thoughts अभी build हो रही है, right, and आप खाना खा रहे हो, आपको black dal मिल गई और by chance कड़ी चावल है मेरे favorite, तो I would just hog on that and आहिस्ता ना once clarity of thought आने लग गई, exposure बढ़ने लग गया. Now, and trying to understand what Guru Nanak is trying to preach is the 3 things, right? Is the kirat karo, right? Do your work, have an honest living. Naam japo, just remember the energy that created you. And the last is the one chako, like whatever that you earn, give it, share it with the less privileged people, right? These are 3 principles of Sikhism, very core. And ये हमेशा ना मैं इसको डीप डाइव करता रहता है कि am I doing these things, am I doing these things, मैं कर रहा हूँ. And when you sit for a langar, right, and what now recently I've started admiring is when I have langar, I see around, अपनी quality की बात की, you have people who I don't know, different caste, creed, culture. I don't even know who these people are. I've been served the same food,
Right.
the same thali, different thali,
Right.
and now, you know, ये तीन चीजें मैं सोचता रहता हूँ कि these किर्त करो, नाम जपो, वर्ण छको, and equality. And I judge myself on a daily basis whether I'm on that principle, because ultimately that's become a better human being. I've met a person after a long time that tick marks on all the 4 things, Paji.
It means a lot coming from you.
I don't know jab ye jayega episode. This has been a delight recording with you.
No, thank you for
and I'm very sure that what you're building as a custodian of Robin Hood Army, thank you with folded hands. Thank you for the impact that you're creating. Thank you to all the Robins that are creating that impact. I'm very sure in the future we'll do a part 2 also very soon, where we evolve much more better. But thank you, Paji. Thank you for all the impact that you're creating. Yeah, Paji, thank you so much for recording.
You're very kind, and like you said, like you started with something and ended with something. Like I think everything I mentioned today, probably 90% of things I am not directly involved. Right? Like it's the work of like people who are wearing the green t-shirt and going out and doing that, and I get to narrate the work which is happening. So like again, the thank you gave me, I will convey it to them, and for anyone who's trying to make a difference in their own way. Right. So,
but thank you to all the Robins who are creating impact, and let's all truly build Bharat and India a great nation and a happy nation. Thank you, Paji, for doing this.